Good evening.
Because I mean, her daughter's still there, and she helps foster.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Now, is there any? I don't know. Part of me goes, if she's not the one making the decision, like recuse your.
Good evening. I don't know. Okay, he's gonna go. I feel. I don't know. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mrs. Richards, roll call, please.
Yes. President Schultz, members of the board, let the record show that all 5 board members are present this evening.
Would you now join me in a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the agenda. All those in favor?
President
Aye.
Schultz,
Mrs. Reese?
before we vote, I would like to ask that we adjust the agenda, please, and move our board organization to right after the approval of the agenda.
I second it.
Which number was that, Mrs. Reese? Sorry.
To move,
6.4?
no, 9.1 and 9.2
Okay.
to following the approval of the agenda.
You second it? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. At this time, we have moved on the agenda, so we'll now vote for the new governing board president for 2024.
I'm sorry. I think we have to make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Before we get to the, okay, sorry. Okay.
I move to approve the amended agenda.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Okay, now moving on to 9.1, election of governing board president for 2024.
I'd like to make the motion to nominate board member Tiffany Schultz to be the president.
Mrs. Anderson?
I would like to nominate myself to be president for our board.
I nominate board member Michelle Anderson for president.
Okay. Any other nominations? So first we'll vote on the first one and then the second one. Okay. All those in favor of,
Do we want to spend any time talking about
Oh, sure.
anything? Or I was just asking if people would like an opportunity to say things. Sure. I'll advocate. I just think currently the way things are going as far as policies and those types of things make sense to what's going on. It seemed like a logical fit, so.
all those in favor of Tiffany Schultz, myself being president for the 2024, aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
All those in favor of Michelle Anderson for the new president?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay. Motion carries 3-2. Mrs. Anderson, you are now the new president of the 20. And then for the governing board vice president for 2024,
I'd like to nominate myself for VP.
I'll nominate Board Member Tiffany Schultz.
Mrs. Reese, do you have any desire to? None. This is your, okay. All those in favor of Mrs. Van Hook for governing board vice president for 2024?
Aye.
Aye.
All those, aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries 4-1. We will now switch spaces.
You don't have to.
We'll just take, and then, just okay.
Just switch.
It's up to you. Could I? Sure. Do you want to switch your name, please? Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay, thank you, everybody. And we're now going to move on to item, the superintendent's report from Mrs. Richards. Thank you. President Anderson, members of the board, welcome to another segment of Higley Adventures. I'd like to introduce Mr. Lotzenheiser. He has two special announcements.
President Anderson, members of the board, tonight it's a very exciting night that we get to recognize two different sports teams for their championships. And so our first one we're going to introduce is the Higley High football team. You've probably heard them in the lobby. But so I'm going to introduce Mr. Fields, the principal of Higley High School, and then we're going to bring the kids in, and Mr. Zuby's going to talk a little bit about the season. Yep, they're all in.
Madam President and board members, I'm very proud to be here tonight with these fine young gentlemen who represented our high school in such an outstanding manner. I'm going to introduce the 5A Football Conference Coach of the Year, Mr. Eddie Zuby, who's going to talk about the team and their accomplishments this year.
First off, thank you, board, for having us for a second year in a row. We enjoy being here. We'll try to come back next year. None of this is possible without a supportive community, without a supportive district, without a supportive administration. Parents, we've talked. We appreciate everything you do. Our community has really rallied around us. Sponsorships, coming to the games. We try to give back as much as we can for the community. And most importantly, these guys. And we talk about the trophy and what it symbolizes and stuff. And yes, it is the state championship, but it's the journey. right? It's a journey from when we started in January, getting all the way to go through that, the ups and the downs, the brotherhood, the camaraderie. This senior class for us is very, very special. They never lost in the playoffs. So every playoff game they won, they had 8 opportunities, and they went 8-0 in that, and that's special. So when their back was up against the wall, they came through. So give them a round of applause for that for sure. And again, just want to say thank you to the board allowing us to travel and have those types of experiences and doing the things that we're allowed to do with the support of administration. Anything that we need or want, I know that you guys will help us get to what we need. So again, thank you very much. Back-to-back 5A state champion Higley Knights.
Thank you. Hold on, let's get a picture with the board members.
Let them through, guys. They'll come right in here. Oh, you take a picture. Hey, one more time, huge round of applause. Back-to-back 5A state champion Higley Knights. All right, thanks again, Mr. Fields, for introducing the team. At this point, I would like to recognize the Sossaman Middle School cross-country team for their East Valley Conference Championship. So, Mr. Keeling, if you want to bring them in, please, let's give a big round of applause for the EVC champion cross-country team from Sossaman.
All right, we were going to have them run in here, but they're so fast, I was worried you wouldn't see them. So I just want to say our coaches are absolutely fantastic, and this year, with the support of district administration and the governing board, our team traveled to McFarland, California to train with the McFarland team, which had a Disney movie made about them and stuff. It's a very cool story. And I think that the care and the passion that our coaches put into this program is why our girls finished 3rd overall, their highest finish ever, and our boys won the EVC championship. And so enough from me. Mr. Halleck or Ms. Burke?
Thank you. This is just an awesome group of young men right here that I want you guys to meet. This is our Spartan cross country team. Coach Burke and I just have the best time coaching these kids. So parents, thank you so much for your support all season. We had an undefeated season this season for boys, and we even got a perfect score, meaning that Spartans took 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st in one of our meets. So just a phenomenal job to our boys and to our girls, but our boys were our champions this season, so thank you so much.
All right, another big round of applause. Spartan Cross Country. Mr. Keeling, if you'd like to lead them in a run out, go ahead. We'll let them run out. You're at the front. Congratulations. Good to see you. Oh, there you are.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, brother.
Thank you, Mr. Lotzenheiser. Such exciting things to celebrate this evening. We also want to celebrate our 100th day of school. We were able to visit some schools, and I don't know what happened to our children, but they grew gray hair, they were using walkers, they had hearing aids, they had the best time of what they think they might look like when they're 100 years old. All right. Next, we need to celebrate Santan Elementary. They have been recognized as a 2023 Leader in Me Lighthouse Academic Honor Roll School. Mr. Mercado, you're in the audience. Are you by yourself? You should stand up. The Lighthouse Academic Honor Roll recognizes Leader in Me schools that have both met the rigorous requirements necessary to achieve and maintain Lighthouse certification and show exemplary academic growth or proficiency as measured by the state accountability standards. It's schools like Santan that serve as examples for Leader in Me schools throughout the world. Congratulations to everyone at Santan Elementary. We celebrate this achievement with you. In alignment with HUSD's Portrait of a Graduate, Higley Helps, in December, the Human Resources Department organized an annual food drive for St. Vincent de Paul. 900 pounds of food were collected and will be provided to families and individuals served by St. Vincent de Paul, whose mission wouldn't be possible without community support. We are grateful to our employees who are always ready to provide support for our community. And I know Ms. Karen Johnson is here, and also Ms. Nicole Johnson. We call them Johnson and Johnson. So they supported this initiative, and it was quite amazing. So thank you to HR and to all the employees here in Higley. All right, the Arizona Department of Education Career and Technical Education Unit reviewed Higley Unified School District for compliance, and we'd like to congratulate the HUSD CTE department for having all programs compliant. Each program was also scored for quality, and all of our programs met the distinguished rating, which is the very top rating possible. So congratulations, and a thank you to the Assistant Director of this program, Craig Pearson. In addition, Higley's Director of Maintenance and Construction, Gustavus Landeros, has recently been accepted into the Town of Gilbert Citizen Leadership Institute. Queen Creek citizen leaders are citizen ambassadors, civic leaders, and community stewards. Since 1995, the Queen Creek Citizen Leadership Institute has graduated over 700 participants and continues to be an integral and valuable part of the Queen Creek experience. Gustavo, is he here tonight? All right, we want to acknowledge him when we see him. It's amazing. In addition, it's time to acknowledge Executive Director of Secondary Education, David Lotzenheiser, Assistant Director of Human Resources, Nicole Johnson, and Coronado Elementary teacher, Jen Ignazio. They were accepted and have been participating in the Gilbert Leadership Class 32. Gilbert Leadership was founded in 1991 and brings together individuals with diverse backgrounds and experiences to develop their leadership potential and exposes participants to issues impacting our community. We're very proud of these individuals. And Nicole, David, all right. And I don't think Jen is here this evening. All right. President Anderson, are you ready for points of pride? Okay. So let's start out with our points of pride from Cooley Middle School. We need Principal Chad Cantrell, Vice Principal Louisa Schwartz, and Dean Brent Brandenburg.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. We have lots of Cooley people here, so thank you guys for coming out to support our Points of Pride tonight. So we're very excited. This is my first year as a principal of Cooley, so this is my very first Points of Pride. So I thought since we're all here, we're all going to each kind of take a different person in the presentation, just so that way you hear from all of our admin team, because we make up a team here at Cooley, and that's part of that Points of Pride, part of why we're here supporting each other. So we're very proud of Cooley. So we're all going to take a moment to present somebody tonight. So I would like to start by acknowledging our volunteer Point of Pride, Jack Englert. So this year at Cooley Middle School, we started the year off short an Algebra 1 teacher. We had some substitutes in place, and we had a parent reach out that her dad had a background in math and was willing to come volunteer over at Cooley. So Jack came in pretty early in the school year and spent every day working with our students voluntary as a co-teacher for the class, spending every day making sure the students were ready. He enjoyed working with them so much that he went and got his substitute certificate, so that way he could actually take over the class as a substitute teacher in the second semester. So we were super lucky, super fortunate to find Jack. The kids really enjoyed working with him. He's actually coming back tomorrow to substitute for the class, so he can't get away. So we very much appreciate Jack. We got very lucky to find him. Very lucky that he was willing to volunteer every day for an entire quarter, and then for all intents and purposes, volunteer that whole first semester to help our students out even in retirement. So we very much appreciate Jack and all the work he did for our students, so thank you so much. Handshake them. Jack, you stay up here.
All right, it is my privilege to announce our classified staff Points of Pride for Cooley Middle School this year. She's unfortunately unable to be here. She's extremely sick. I guess the whole household caught the bug. So she really wanted to be here tonight, but was unfortunately not able to make it. But we do want to recognize her. Her name is Annie Holden. She is a custodian on our campus. So we were lucky enough to get her about halfway through last year. And ever since day one, friendly attitude, energetic, smiles a lot. Just a super hard worker. Her work ethic kind of speaks for herself. One of those things that we hear every day on the radio is we need assistance somewhere. And even if it's not her that's being asked, she's the first to respond. And that just kind of tells you a little bit about Annie. And we're just really fortunate to have her, and our campus would not be as successful and such a great place to be without her.
I am very privileged to be able to talk a little bit about our certified staff. I want to say some things that her colleagues and we, when we're talking about who should have this award, say about her. Ms. Valenzuela's inexhaustible work ethic is one to strive for, is instilled among her students, and carries over in all other classrooms, clubs, and organizations throughout the Cooley campus. Her positive and desire to be the best she can is infectious. She has worked tirelessly to help build and grow a robotics program at Cooley Middle School, taking time to attend various professional developments, meeting with outside organizations and people, as well as cultivating relationships with our feeder school programs. I have to add in there that Ms. Valenzuela had zero experience in the robotics field when she took over and decided to make this program her own, and has done an incredible job. Evidence of the role she plays at Cooley Middle includes her maxed out robotics classes, everybody wants to get in and there's no room, a robust robotics club, and all the time and energy she spends being a part of the Cooley campus by building relationships with her colleagues and students. Cooley would not be the same without her. Jennifer Valenzuela.
And then finally, our points of pride as a student. And so, like I said, I'm in my first year, and that's important for this student specifically because we have a lot of great students at Cooley that we're extremely proud of. And so it's oftentimes, when you're new, it's hard to always know who to choose. But sometimes students make it really easy for you. They stand out so quickly. And our points of pride student this year is one of those students. It's Avery Kaiser. She's a 7th grade student at Cooley Middle School. So we're just really excited to acknowledge her tonight. The first thing that I got told when I announced to our staff who our student was what a great pick. That was the first teacher who found me, ran up to me to find me to make sure I knew that we picked the right student with Avery. Avery is a member of student council. She's in honors classes. She contributes all around campus. She smiles to everybody. She's friendly with all of our students. She just stands out as such a leader on campus, and that's exactly what we want to see in all of our Cooley students. And so we're extraordinarily proud to have Avery as a Cooley Cougar this year and for next year. She's a 7th grade student, like I mentioned before. So we're super excited and super proud to see what she'll do, not just this year, but also next year. So Avery, congratulations on being the Cooley student point of pride.
Principal Cantrell, we usually have your winners introduce who's here with them this evening. So.
With me here tonight is my wife, Sheila, my daughter, Siobhan, my grandson, Bryce. Hi, Bryce. My son-in-law, Darren, and my grandson, Nathan, and my granddaughter, Margaret.
Tonight, I have my whole family, well, almost all. My husband, Isaac, my kids, McKenna, Kayla, Brielle, Noel, and my mom and dad.
With me, I have my mom, my dad, and then my Stuco teacher and my math teacher.
Can I add, I'm sorry, I was staring at my family. Sorry, guys. All back there, right there. Love you.
All right, so congratulations to all our Cooley Points of Pride winners. Thank you, guys. And we're going to take a quick picture.
Next, we'd like to introduce Principal Dan Fox with his points of pride from Williamsfield High School.
All right, good evening, Madam President, members of the board. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to represent Williamsfield High School tonight. We have such a great staff, such a great student body, such great volunteers who come in and help out on our campus in all of our different programs. It makes this process always very difficult to narrow down. But we have a really good group of people here tonight to represent Williamsfield High School. So I'm going to start with our certified staff member here, Miss Jamie Crumbaker. Jamie Crumbaker is one of the most dedicated Williamsfield High School teachers we have. She finds ways to help multiple departments, whether it is her department of CTE or her surrogate department of PE. Jamie frequently volunteers to help for various extracurricular activities, and she often fills in as our athletic trainer if we have multiple activities on campus. She is one of our tech mentors for the campus, helps with PD, presentations, and is an all-around team player. I've got a lot to say about you, Ms. Crumbaker, sorry. Ms. Crumbaker started a new practice last year by introducing a partnership with the Children's Cancer Network to invite young children with cancer and their families to our campus so we can honor their journey and their battle with cancer and show them a good time at some of our sporting events. This made more work for Jamie, but by being selfless, she has taught our students in our various athletic programs that good deeds transcend high school. We could list her dedication to sports medicine, her desire to add numerous dual enrollment courses, and her willingness to cover classes in a pinch, and we would only begin to scratch the surface. Thank you, Ms. Crumbaker, for your dedication to our campus. Yep, you got it. Thank you, Ms. Richards. We'll move on to the next person here. Hold on, let me grab the next one. We'll do our fabulous volunteer who has done so much for our theater and drama program. Miss Linda Smith is our volunteer for the evening. Thank you. So Linda is an unsung hero in our arts department, and it took me until last year to truly realize her impact on our drama program here at Williamsfield High School. Linda has been the costume coordinator for our theater program for many years now, and she has helped multiple theater teachers achieve greatness. Many people come to our plays and performances, but what they don't realize is that many of the fancy-looking cast members don't just get their wardrobe straight off the rack. Some are created from scratch, some need alterations, and some get damaged over time and need repairs. This is where Linda steps in to make our students look fabulous. However, Linda's true impact is not based in her wardrobe abilities here. As a volunteer, she spends many hours with our theater students, and she imparts her extensive knowledge of education and life to our Blackhawks. She is like the grandmother of our theater. So she does a lot for our kids, and the kids love her, and she's an incredibly positive influence on our campus here. So thank you, Linda, for being an integral part of our drama program for so long. Treat from the admin here. Yeah, congratulations. All right, next up, I think it's very important that we honor our classified staff, Miss Michaela Korkus. So Miss Michaela Korkus came to us from another district within the state of Arizona, and she had to kind of learn how to go from the paper system that they were running there to all our fancy computer systems here. But the good thing is she actually knew a lot about all those systems to begin with, and she's just come in and taken off and done a fabulous job here. So we selected Michaela not because she is a huge Phoenix Suns fan like Mr. Fox, but because Michaela is a rock star. Michaela has come in as our new bookstore manager this year, and she's completely rocked the position. We have received so much positive feedback from everybody this school year about how helpful Michaela has been, how thorough she is, and how she excels in all facets of the position. Michaela has learned a lot, especially coming from a school district that like I said, used paper frequently in the bookstore. Any strange obstacle that's thrown at her, she has managed to tackle through mental toughness and determination. Thank you, Michaela, for making Williamsfield a better place. Yeah, couple presents in for you. Yeah, absolutely. And finally, last but not least, save the best for last here. Our student, someone I had the pleasure of meeting, almost 4 years ago now, right? And we still got one more year together, Natasha. But Natasha Scow is our Points of Pride student for the 2023-2024 school year. You, right there, yeah. Wherever you want, Natasha. Oh. So Natasha is one of our star STEM students at Williamsfield High School. Not only is she heavily involved in our engineering and robotics programs, but she is also heavily involved in our solar car team. Natasha is a leader within these programs regardless of whether she has a title or not. She has communicated with administration on behalf of these programs. She works with other students in the classroom to push them forward on their projects, and she is also involved in other aspects of our campus. This year, she is a delegate to our girls' state, which is a tremendous honor, and it's a tremendous opportunity for you as well, Natasha. She's volunteered at elementary schools to help teach students about her experiences in robotics and engineering. And finally, Natasha is a bubbly and kind person who helps make Williamsfield a more positive place. Thank you for representing Williamsfield High School and as an exemplar Blackhawk, Natasha. Thank you. I'll give you a hug. I hugged everyone else, I might as well hug you too. That's for you, and then a little present for you. And then, Natasha, if you wouldn't mind, introduce who you have with you here tonight.
I have my parents and my siblings.
All right, I have my mom, Melissa, with me, and then my son, Jax.
Well, my Williamsfield family is involved in a couple of activities. One is in band and currently at some band practice. The others had dinners to go to. So I'm here by myself tonight.
My Williamsfield family is all at sporting events because that's where all my friends are. And unfortunately, my parents are sick this week, so they could not make it.
Thank you, Ms. Richards, and congratulations to everyone recognized tonight, and thank you for everything that you've done for this district. It's a school night, so if you would like to leave, this would be a great time to sneak out before we put you to bed with our board business. No, that's not okay? Okay, we're going to be moving on to the, item 4.1, the request. Just kidding. I'm sorry. Ms. Richards, please. Thank you.
Yes. Our upcoming events include Thursday, January 18th, One Pill Can Kill. It's a community event and a presentation here in the boardroom at 6 p.m. We've gotten really great reviews on this, so we hope everyone can join us. On Tuesday, January 23rd, is our HUSD job fair. That will also take place in the boardroom. There are 2 sessions, 9 to 11 and 1 to 3. Next, on January 30th, is the second Citizens Committee meeting here in the HUSD boardroom at 5 p.m. It was very well attended the first round, so we're excited for the second meeting. Also, on Tuesday, January 30th, is kindergarten roundup at all of our elementary campuses at 5:30. So if you know somebody with a kindergartner, get them to school, because we can't wait to meet them. And on Tuesday, February 6th, is the public forum related to the superintendent search. People can attend virtually or come to the boardroom at 5 p.m. And that concludes upcoming events.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. And now moving on to agenda item 4.1, under the request to speak. I'm going to read through the expectations for speaking in public or at a public meeting. We value input from our constituents. This time on our agenda has been set aside for anyone from the audience who wishes to address the board. Those that wish to speak should have filled out speaker cards, which are due prior to the start of our meeting. Members of the board may not discuss, comment, or take action on matters raised that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. Also, we ask that audience members practice proper public meeting decorum, refraining from either negative or positive responses, including clapping or verbal outbursts, to ensure fairness to all points of view. Those that refuse to follow these rules may be asked to leave. In accordance with policy BEDH, public participation at board meetings, if considered necessary, the governing board president shall set a time limit on the length of the comment period. In order to ensure that each individual has an opportunity to address the board, the president may also set a time limit for individual speakers. Thank you for your cooperation. Okay, first to speak is Heather Balch.
Good evening. Imagine, if you would, a preschool class filled with young, excited students. Two students were drawn to the same toy truck. It was a shiny red fire truck that sparked their imaginations. Both of them reached for it simultaneously, their eyes wide with excitement. What do you think might happen? A potential conflict over the toy. Typically, young children may react impulsively or argue, grabbing for the toy, and in extreme cases, sometimes physical aggression. However, we see a positive shift in behavior due to the implementation of skills that promote social and emotional development. Teaching children self-awareness, emotion management, and empathy can make a significant difference in their interactions. When students are equipped with the ability to recognize and express their feelings, it opens up avenues for communication. Instead of resorting to impulsive actions, they begin to use their words and convey their emotions and perspectives. This shift fosters more understanding and cooperative environment among children. By verbalizing their emotions, they enable their peers to understand their viewpoint. This communication can lead to finding equitable solutions that benefit everyone involved. This process promotes positive and inclusive learning environment, encouraging collaboration and empathy among preschool students. This is social emotional learning, and it matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, can we please hear from Allie Ratliff?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Allie Ratliff, and I'm a member of the Power Ranch community. In October, our school's principal, Mr. Chris Reuter, disappeared. Over the last few months, I've had many conversations and spoken to many people. Through my research, I've learned that one of the big reasons he disappeared was because of the actions of an individual off campus, an individual who was not even supervised by Mr. Reuter. Yet Sherry Richards held Mr. Reuter responsible for this already terminated individual's behavior. Right after Mr. Reuter's investigation, an employee at the Bridges with a similar position as the individual mentioned above had a meeting about their work schedule. Come to find out, their employee had been creating his own work schedule for years. Did Mr. Bickle get in any kind of trouble for this? Did Alex Urzo also know that his employee was creating his own hours? Was Alex Urzo held accountable for any of his employees not working within their contracted hours? Did Mrs. Richards protect Mr. Bickle and Mr. Urzo because she does not have the same negative feelings for them as she does for Mr. Reuter? We all know that Bridges is one of Miss Richards' pride and joy. I believe she even tried to poach more than the allotted amount of teachers to Bridges. Miss Richards' inconsistencies don't start or stop there, though. When asked for clarification as to why Miss Richards did not communicate that our principal was off campus, she responded that there was no policy in place. The Arizona Superintendent's Office begs to differ on this matter. In addition to that, she added that she thought Mr. Reuter would only be gone for a day or two. It's my understanding that standard protocol is typically around a week. Why did she say she believed it would only be a day or two later down the line after the matter was settled? It was not until it became social media buzz that our school did not have a principal that the district felt the need to address it with their vague emails that allowed rumors to fly, dragging Mr. Reuter's name in the mud and creating more anxiety for families and staff. The climate and culture survey conducted at our school scored Mr. Reuter's leadership at an 87%. The average score for surveys like this is between 70 and 85%. This means Mr. Reuter's leadership exceeded average. I would be very curious about the results of a culture and climate survey for those under Sherry Richards. Additionally, I find it absolutely astounding that all of you have never once set foot on our campus. Through all the lies that have gone on, these secret meetings, get-togethers, whatever you want to call him, and Miss Van Hock's call to have a look into our school, all of which took place over this past summer, at least one of you would have decided you wanted to learn more about our campus before voting on the fate of the person who headed it, let alone take the time to speak with him, but you did not. You took Miss Richards' word, and you still have not stepped foot on our campus to acknowledge us. You can ask the majority of parents who attend Power Ranch, not the very small minority, Miss Van Hock and Miss Anderson. And we certainly won't ask you to house us privately to tell you our feelings. And the majority of us will tell you that Mr. Reuter was an incredible principal. You can also probably ask the majority of our staff, but they probably won't gain Miss Van Hock's empathy unless they've cheated on a standardized test. In August, Miss Van Hock called for an investigation into the personnel and turnover rate at Power Ranch. Tonight, I'm asking you to look into the personnel and turnover rate under Sherry Richards. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Next will be Taylor Francis.
Madam President, members of the board and cabinet, I wish to speak on two items this evening. First, board meetings are an integral part of any school district. For many parents, staff, and students, board meetings are the only opportunity these individuals normally have to see or interact with the school board. With the dedication and work hours of many teachers, parents, and staff, a 5 p.m. meeting time conflicts with their home and work schedules, preventing them from regularly attending. Having the meetings broadcast online is a wonderful feature, allowing these meetings to reach many others around the area. Even with this technological feat, it is no substitution for in-person participation, including the ability to request to speak. Of the unified school districts, Higley is the only one meeting at this time. Gilbert meets at 6 p.m., Chandler, 7 p.m., Paradise Valley, 6:30, Scottsdale, 6 p.m., Deer Valley, 7 p.m., Cave Creek, 6 p.m., and Dysart, 6 p.m. I respectfully make the request that the board review its meeting time and adjust the regular monthly meeting time and move it back to 6 p.m. or later, allowing more teachers, parents, and community members whom the board represents a better opportunity for in-person attendance. Second, on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, a fire devastated the home of the assistant principal of one of HUSD's elementary schools, displacing her and her immediate family for the holidays and months to come. Almost immediately after, word spread throughout the district, and dozens of community members rallied together to support one of our own. A GoFundMe was organized, and the goal was met in under 72 hours. In the end, the original goal was surpassed by over $1,000. What a testament of our district and the members who reside within it. I want to publicly recognize and thank everyone who gave to support our assistant principal. The outpouring of generosity was both humbling and inspiring. There are many great things about our school district, and what a blessing it is to witness one firsthand. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Karen Files.
Good evening. I wanted to first thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm going to use this time to highlight some amazing things happening at Cooley Middle School. As you heard earlier or saw earlier, Miss Jennifer Valenzuela, her robotics team showed up in a huge way at a recent tournament, earning third place in a crowded field of 30+ teams. We had a wildly successful open house for incoming sixth grade students and parents. And Chillin' with the Cougars is set to begin tomorrow and continue on Friday. This opportunity to bridge that nerve-wracking time between elementary and middle school is eased by the hard work of our 7th grade staff and the tireless efforts of Jody Stott and our student council. I'm a proud teacher at Cooley Middle School, and I continue to appreciate the support that we receive from district administration and from this very board. Now I want to tell you a brief story about my own son. We live in a neighboring district, I won't mention the name, and he had been a student at the same elementary school since kindergarten. He spent one single morning at Cooley's last year's Chillin' with the Cougars and decided that same day that Cooley was the place for him. He was drawn to the energy and he was drawn to the excitement. So he left the familiarity of his feeder school and his feeder middle school. We open enrolled him, and he is now a 7th grade student at Cooley Middle School. My son's schedule has 6 teachers on it. 5 of his 6 teachers have parents of current or graduated Higley students. Furthermore, I would like to highlight that the decision made with our district administration for our students, staff, and community by the board don't just impact teachers and their students. In fact, many of our teachers at Cooley Middle School are also parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents of Higley students and spouses of Higley employees. From Cooley's front office staff, administration, countless teachers, paraprofessionals, and our security officer, we have a vested interest in our schools because we are parents and loved ones of Higley students and staff. I've had the honor and privilege of teaching with Cooley and with Higley Virtual Academy and have been shaped and made better by my experiences with a handful of students, at least one of which has a parent in this very room. So with that, I want to thank the members of the board who trust our schools, teachers, and staff with their precious assets. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Linda Payne.
President Anderson and members of the board, I guess. I'm not very good at knowing how to start this, but I just want you to know that was really nice tonight to see so much recognition being done. That was really, really nice. The main thing that I wanted to talk about tonight was, like someone had mentioned before, if we could change the time to 6 o'clock. There are so many people I have talked to that would love to come to these meetings but cannot because it's just too early, and they would like to come and be part of this and learn what's going on. And because the ones that have come have learned a lot once they've gotten here and seen what's been happening. So I would like to ask you to please consider changing this time to 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we are moving on to the consent agenda. I move.
President Anderson,
Yes.
if I may, I'm not sure when we'll be discussing the schedule for this year, but if we can consider a 6 p.m. start time for the meetings on that schedule, so when we vote on it, we can consider it at that time. Thank you.
Yes, we can do that. Vice President Van Hook.
So are we adding that to a future discussions or, okay, all right, thank you. Okay, consent agenda items, I move that we approve consent agenda items 5.1 through 5.16.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. And Ms. Johnson, you had something you wanted to mention?
Yes, thank you, President Anderson, members of the board. And I'd just like to recognize Mr. Brian Griggs. He's here in the audience, and he is our interim principal over at Power Ranch right now. And I'd just like, if you would stand up, Mr. Griggs, I know that, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Griggs.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Griggs. I also want to take a second, been holding on to speaking about Mr. Griggs because there's lots of principals and administration when you have kids going K through 12. I both have graduated, and I can always say something positive about the administration that my kids have interacted with, but Mr. Griggs actually made a difference in our son's life. Okay, so I'm sitting at home and I get a phone call from the principal, and that's never good, and especially when it came to, forgive me for saying my son, and our son, and it was Mr. Griggs. He didn't have to make this phone call, but he was calling to say that something positive that our son had done. And after many, many, many years of struggling, that phone call sent me to my knees. In moments when you need hope and hear positive things. You're wonderful, and good luck, and good luck at Power Ranch. I hope that you can really make a difference, and they need you. Thank you.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
I just want to echo your statement as well. I've known Mr. Griggs for 9 years, and he's an exceptional administrator, and Power Ranch is lucky to have you.
And President Anderson, I'd like to add something as well. When we got to the spelling bee, I know you were trying to juggle both schools, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we're moving on to agenda item, or for the information items, agenda item 6.1, statement regarding teen violence from district administration and HUSD governing board member Ms. Schultz.
President Anderson, members of the board, your district administration wanted to provide a statement to you and to the community. The statement regarding teen violence that we're all aware of. So Higley Unified School District acknowledges and recognizes the importance of the recent East Valley discussions regarding the known issue of teen violence. It goes without saying that as educators, we care about our community's children. We fully support efforts to address the violence that has impacted our surrounding communities and improve circumstances for all teens and young adults in Higley and beyond. Our district lives by its core values of integrity, connections, learning-centered and accountability. Our strategic plan and our portrait of a graduate outline our values and stresses that we demonstrate strong ethics for the betterment of the whole. Build relationships where all in our school community feel a sense of belonging, and create a community committed to a standard of excellence. Across our district, there are programs that promote character development and values for our students. As we mentioned earlier this evening, Higley Helps, our most recent community service initiative, encourages our youth to get more involved in helping others. Each of our schools prioritize culture and character building through initiatives unique to their own campus, including Leader in Me, No Excuses University, Act 212, and many more. District-wide, we all agree to standards and behavior through our student and employee handbooks designed to create a safe and welcoming environment for everyone. When issues arise, we are committed to addressing them according to our policies. Our support includes a safe hotline to bring issues to the district's attention, our See Something, Say Something campaign, and school counseling support on each campus. We are reflecting on our programs and recognize the importance of continuous improvement. And we are open to collaborate in community initiatives that may come from current conversations. As always, we will continue to support our students, our families, and prioritize a well-rounded education for all students in the Higley Unified School District.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz, do you want to share?
Thank you, President Anderson. Before I make the statement, I want to just say that our open meeting laws and our laws don't allow us to talk about things before, as we've mentioned before. And so at the advice of Mrs. McClellan, then this was how we had to do it in order to come up with something as a board. So as the former president of the Higley School Board, I feel compelled to address a matter of utmost concern within our community: teen violence and the loss of a young life, Preston Lord. Recent incidents have brought light to horrific acts against our teens and the need for kids and parents and the entire community to stand up against teen violence. And it is imperative that we as a community unite to denounce such behavior. It is important for us as a district and a member of the community at large to be proactive, to look at our current programs that Mrs. Richards mentioned and explore new programs. I'm personally deeply disturbed and saddened by the senseless violence and the loss of Preston Lord and the other teens targeted and attacked across our community. I know that all our kids and families have been affected in some way. And since our agenda policy, Arizona laws don't allow for a lot of wiggle room on our agenda, it would be at this time that I would seek feedback from the rest of the board regarding this statement. As you know, Mrs. Richards, I've been very vocal with Cabinet over the past few weeks of my desire to make sure Higley is a part of the community speaking out against teen violence, and that we make sure parents, our surrounding districts, and our community as a whole know that we are here to support them and to be a part of the solution. I'm hopeful that we can discuss this as a board and look at ways for Higley to be a part of the solution. I know that Higley already has programs in place, such as the Kindness Campaign, the Hotline for Reporting, but it is possible that we may need more and that our kids need to feel safe to come forward. I have an excerpt from Katie McPherson regarding the Upstander campaign that she is championing, and while I consider Katie to be a champion for our youth, I want to get the rest of the board's input on the program and if we want to ask district to look into this further. I have a copy of the outline of the campaign from her that I'll hand out to all of you. District would like to see if we'd like district to look into this further and possibly have on a future agenda item. I know we are all deeply saddened by the loss of Preston Lord, and we're sickened by the additional videos and violence we've all seen in our community. And we know that whether a bystander or directly involved, the students, parents, and staff at Higley, we've all been affected. Our schools play a crucial role in shaping the future of our students, and it is our collective responsibility to provide a safe and nurturing environment for their growth. Teen violence not only threatens the well-being of those directly involved. At this time, I'd like to ask for feedback from the board regarding the statement and possibility of looking into the upstander program. Thank you, President Anderson.
President Anderson and Board Member Schultz, first off, I wish to extend gratitude for bringing it up because I think it is important that we make statements for things that impact our community. I recognize that not necessarily as far as our understanding, students at our school were directly involved, but they were most likely at that party, or at the very least, they received the media that gets shared afterwards as a result. Having worked in high school and having spent time, teaching and being in schools in general, I cannot emphasize enough the importance that I feel these types of social emotional programs do for our students, because not only do we have things, and one of the things I routinely express to my students is that they are more responsible for far more information than we ever were. They are constantly inundated with news and other things that we did not have. And as a result, you can tell that there is an increased level of anxiety across the board. Not to mention the added pressure of making sure that we do good on certain tests or certain programs in order to get into college, because the cost of that and everything else is pretty high. So for me, I'm super supportive of this program, or at the very least looking into it. So I'm happy to start looking into some of that and seeing how it could impact our district in ways in which we can incorporate some of these things, because it's valuable and it matters, and we are impacted on a daily. So I appreciate that.
President Anderson, I'd like to read a statement that I wrote. I want to emphasize my strong stance against all forms of bullying and encourage our students to speak up when they witness such behavior. While I empathize deeply with what happened to Preston and his family, I believe that introducing a new program into our district is not the most effective solution, especially when we lack information about it. Our district already has robust policies addressing bullying, and tonight we are voting on an additional measure related to student discipline. The focus should be on ensuring that our existing bullying and student discipline policies are well communicated to staff. By doing so, we can demonstrate our commitment to supporting our teachers and staff in enforcing these policies effectively. Introducing another program that diverts time and resources away from academics is not something we can afford to do with our declined academics. It's essential to recognize that the issue at hand extends beyond our district and is being addressed by Town Council. I've been invited to join the Teen Violence Committee for Town Council, which will provide updates as the situation progresses throughout our community. This collaborative effort ensures a broader impact and a more comprehensive approach to addressing the issue of teen violence. Additionally, parents play a pivotal role in addressing this issue. Parents must take responsibility for their children's actions and ensure that they receive proper education at home regarding bullying. We must work together with the parents to ensure that this is being addressed, because this is a lesson that should be taught at home and reinforced elsewhere. Thank you.
President Anderson. Obviously, this is a very sad time for our town, and not just our town. Obviously, it goes to Queen Creek and Chandler and our community as a whole. I think everyone, besides the shock factor of the death of Preston Lord, seeing more and more come out is very difficult in our area, as we've been one of the safest cities. And to see that it's the teen violence that is the problem at the moment. I would like to get more information on the Upstander initiative and look at it, see what it is, if it's something that needs to be discussed that would be introduced into our classrooms, or is it a program to the point, just like One Pill Can Kill, that we can help host community meetings. I would like to see our district, and this is something as we look at for a new superintendent, our district used to be really involved with the town. We used to meet annually with town council as a district, and not just town council, but also Gilbert Police we would meet with. We would also meet with Gilbert Fire. Power Ranch still does a great community effort. They do host a quarterly powwow, which brings Coronado Ranch, Power Ranch, Trilogy, someone from the police department, someone from Queen Creek usually attends, and they have a powwow quarterly that they talk about, and it goes to other communities as well from their HOAs that they talk about issues and concerns. And I think we're still attending that. I know as board president, I was attending those when I could. But I'd like to see us get more involved again with town council as a district, with the Gilbert Police Department as a district, for our community, so we can help do programs. And again, it doesn't mean it has to be programs within the school day, but for our community. I just don't know how many. I don't know that much of that's resumed since COVID. Obviously, COVID stopped all of that. But I would like to see that we try and get that involved, because the more collective people you have together, working together, the less likely we are to see this. And I agree, it starts at home, and it starts with our parents. It does need to continue within our schools, and we are responsible, each and every one of us, whether we're teachers in the schools, whether we're board members, whether we're administrators, just members of this community need to help reinforce that, and make sure that we have a safe community. And in addition to that, that our children are getting the right guidance. I feel for everybody involved here. It has ripped numerous families apart, between those that are lost, those that have been abused, who have been beat up, and those who have been arrested, and there's more to come. And it just tears the whole community apart. So I would like to see about the Upstander initiative, to see if it is something for us to be able to do. The One Pill Can Kill, we have done some other community meetings that
the social media classes that we do, but I would love to just see if we explore this and it does make sense for us.
President Anderson, Board Member Reese, and the first meeting with Town Council is tomorrow, and that's definitely something I can bring up with them too. I look forward. I didn't hesitate to say yes when I was asked, because I think that this is a great opportunity for us to work together. So I definitely will bring that up when I meet tomorrow.
Mrs. Van Hook, I know that Mrs. McPherson is working with both town councils as well as the other districts. She's reached out to Chandler, to Queen Creek, as well as Pinal. So I know that she's working. She wants the entire community, if you look at this blurb, everyone to be a part of this, because as Mrs. Reese mentioned, it does take all of us. So I know she is already working with council regarding this as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, your input. I'm not going to repeat what you said, but I do agree. It starts at the home, keep it community together. These are the points that I made whenever it asks for our opinion or our feedback, we should approach and integrate whatever programs or strategies as a whole community. And it's stressed in what you said. It is stressed with board members, so I think we're on board, pun not intended with that. And I like that the idea of having the community meetings and bringing that back. We have lost touch. That sounds kind of a little deep, but we have lost touch with our community, and this would be a great opportunity to regenerate this. Keep the parents involved, involve the businesses, neighboring schools, districts, emergency responders. Everything you guys said I had on my paper. I love that. I want to make sure that I think what this will do is help us to be transparent and accurate also in information. It's great that we'll possibly, looks like we may have a liaison to the city with the board members so that we can have information directly. Bring back those yearly meetings, have the community meetings if possible. I'm excited to have this discussion, and I'm excited to see what information may come. Ms. Richards, you mentioned Leader in Me, No Excuses University, Act 212. Are there any other programs in place?
Well, ask Williamsville what theirs is. I think it's called Dominate, right? So there are several that are specific to each of the schools, but overall, everybody's doing something.
Okay.
You know, those are the ones that stick out, but every single David Lotzenhauser can probably say more about secondary, because I need to put him on the spot, right?
President Anderson, members of the board, when you look at our secondary schools, a lot of times when we look at how we support students is not just within the classroom, but extracurricular activities and different clubs and groups that can help and support through that. And so many of you have been either a teacher or have had high school kids go through and know that there are different things that we do within our sports and our activities that help support. When we look at different specific things, right now I don't have anything that basically comes to mind as in a tagline, other than it is very important that we support our whole child as we're experiencing that growth. And obviously with the teen violence, that's the age group right now that is the most affected by what's happening in here. And I know that it is having an impact on our students within our community. And we have within our counseling department various resources that we can use to help and support students who are struggling with this. And I do agree that there is a bigger issue that we can help and look and address.
How many counselors do we have in our district?
Mr. Walker. I know that we have 3 at the elementary level, and of course we have Dina Morgan, our Assistant Director of Counseling. Can you help with the total at secondary?
Yeah, sure. Madam President, members of the board, there's 4 counselors at each high school, and then there's also 2 counselors at each middle school, 3 counselors at the elementary, the Director of Counseling Services, and then there's also a counselor that's assigned to special education programming.
Any of those are shared between the schools, or are those solid numbers?
The elementary share amongst the schools,
Okay.
and then the special education counselor divides the time between the BEST program
Okay,
at the 3 school levels.
okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
President Anderson, Mr. Walker, I would like to know, as far as the qualifications for our counselors, if you can provide that at a later time, just to know the certifications. I know they typically have are certified through the Arizona Department of Education, but they don't necessarily hold a behavioral health license. So I'd love to know if any of ours actually have that behavior, if they're certified through behavioral health. And we don't need to discuss it. It's not on the agenda, but at a future time, if you can provide a list, that'd be great.
Sure, Madam President, members of the board would be happy to compile that information for you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for bringing that forward, and thank you for the information, Ms. Schultz and Ms. Richards. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item 6.2. HUSD Governing Board Superintendent District Communications and Protocol. Dr. Tim Ogle, correct, will be joining us this evening and going through this information.
Thank you, Madam President. members of the board, and Ms. Richards, thank you for having me here tonight to talk about this important topic. I wanted to discuss with you the proposal you have in your board packet with regards to communication protocols. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a former superintendent, graduate school faculty, state association executive director. I've worked with or for boards over the last 5 decades. And I'm currently assisting the Arizona School Administrators Association in support of their mission. And as a consultant in that capacity, we're helping districts, when asked, to help develop leadership and good practice at the district level. So I understand the board has asked for this document of communication protocols to be renewed and brought back for discussion and possible future action. The document does have some historical precedent here at Higley. It was originally created in 2021 and is currently linked from your board webpage. The current version is. And so over the last few weeks, I have worked with your senior staff and asked to facilitate tonight its reintroduction to you, really because of updates from board policy, and more importantly, the precarious nature of superintendent searches in the Arizona employment market and the timing of your search. I've personally been involved in every facet of superintendent searches in multiple states. I know that the quality of the applicant pool is directly related to the perceived effectiveness of the board and the district. And I've actually talked with representatives from Ray and Associates a number of times, but also specifically with regards to your search. And I know that every viable candidate has been watching this district since the job was posted. And they would be relieved to know that this board is interested in establishing appropriate communication protocols that are current and agreed to at the board table. As you enter into this phase of your superintendent search, which is so important, it's important for everyone in this room to know that these candidates will be interviewing the 5 of you, as well as you interviewing them. All nonprofit boards, this isn't unique to school boards, but all nonprofit boards need to periodically look at their practices and look at themselves to assess how to be better public servants and demonstrate to your constituents your desire to be the best that you can be and develop a framework to successfully learn to disagree and communicate effectively with one another. With that all being said, the document before you reestablishes some of the common sense board norms and commitments that you hopefully make to professionalism at the board table and demonstrate to your patrons, employees, students, parents, and in addition, your superintendent candidates that you're interested in these protocols. So that all being said, you have a draft document that has been worked on over the last few weeks. And so I'd like to highlight a few elements in there that came to my attention, having been in hundreds of board meetings over my tenure, some things that stood out to me as I worked with senior staff in kind of refreshing this document. So on the first page, you will see a number of bulleted items, and items like 6, 7, and 8 as we move down the bulleted items, particularly 6 and 7, really have to do with the role of the board and the role of the superintendent, and I want to accentuate those because you have great board policy that I have reviewed with regards to how to handle public complaints and public comments. And tonight, the board I would commend you on having a call to the public and the way you manage that. It's also important to the search that these board policies on public comment and public complaints are adhered to with regards to the chain of command, because that's really what you hire a superintendent to manage for you. Also, the the bulleted item, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The seventh one has to do with executive session protocol and how I want to accentuate to you how important that is as you enter into the search phase and into the screening of candidates. You will have very sophisticated professionals that you will be talking to, and you will actually have their career in your hands in these confidential meetings. And having been around superintendent searches and boards over the years, I know 100% confident that you in your social interactions will be asked about the candidates, about the search, about how you're feeling about it. And, you know, there's something we call the administrivia face, where you kind of have this cold, in a friendly way, you're able to say, you know, I really can't talk to you about that as much as I'd love to. And that's just good practice to get used to. So I want to accentuate that. Moving on down, communications with the media at the last part of this page. This can be really tricky for boards and really tricky when difficult challenges come to board meetings. It's easy when things are going smoothly, and it's really difficult when boards and districts face difficult challenges. It's really, really important that a board superintendent team have established practices, and they are dealt with in your board policy KDDA with regards to media relations, but it's really important to reinforce as we think about our own practice as school leaders that each of you is responsible to adhere to these communication agreements. You cannot speak for the board unless you've been authorized to do so. And as an individual board member, you're 20% of the board. You are not speaking on behalf of the board. And when the media comes around, it's important that you notify the district, you work with your senior staff to make sure that there's coordination. On the next page, there is a chart, a graphical representation of the art form, I call it an art form, of the interaction between the board and the superintendent. And I say it's an art form because this is really about interpersonal communication and interpersonal interaction at a very complicated level. Ultimately, you want to hire a superintendent whose number one mission is to help the board be successful. And the superintendent that assumes the job should accept the mission that their job is to help the board be successful. And as a result of that, a lot of districts do graphical representations of this board superintendent interaction to help everybody understand it, board members and employees and patrons, et cetera, because it's a complicated relationship. So obviously on the second piece there, you'll see that the board's exclusive role is to approve policy. But since the board employs the superintendent to develop policy, that's that person's responsibility. And you have a great senior staff team that is very capable of developing policy and making recommendations to the superintendent to bring to the board. Kind of moving along in that same direction, you'll see at the bottom, you're going to expect board members to act as community leaders and be providing feedback, both positive and negative feedback to your superintendent. And you're going to expect your superintendent to maintain good leadership and communications. As I said earlier, having been in hundreds of board meetings over my career, I think it's odd that Higley does not have their superintendent at the board table. I think that sends a signal that the superintendent is not part of the team. And I would encourage you to make that change sooner rather than later. In fact, kind of a sidebar communication, I was contacted by a representative of one of the candidates for the superintendent position who said, I've been watching board meetings and I noticed that the interim superintendent is not at the board table. Is that a new development? And so I fact-checked with the district and learned that that's been common practice here. So I would encourage you to examine that and put your superintendent next to the board president, not only for the symbolism, but also as a practical matter, it helps facilitate good practice. As we move to the next page on communication protocols.
I just have one question.
Of course, this is discussion.
That used to be the case. Do you have history on why that was changed?
Actually, Mrs. Schultz, we've never had the superintendent up here in my 12 years.
Oh, I thought.
But we did discuss it.
Okay.
We discussed it with Dr. Thomason.
Okay.
Part of it was kind of a logistical issue. I'm trying to remember, Mrs. Wade, is there a monitor next to you? Okay. At one point, it was a space like what was available, but we did have that conversation of potentially bringing the superintendent up here and joining the board. And part of that too was also it was their preference not to, that they were wanting to be with their team down there.
Okay.
So but it was discussed. I think that's a great idea. I agree. I've seen other districts and how they're set up.
Sure. I would encourage that. And I think I love, when I work with boards and superintendents, I love to think it's a team of 6. You know, certainly the board has one employee, and you need to have confidence in that person. You need to trust that they're doing their job, and certainly the board has ultimate oversight. But it's a team of 6 to provide really solid leadership. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Reese.
President Anderson, Mr.
Ogle.
Sorry about that.
That's fine.
I personally have watched other board meetings, and I think it's weird to have the superintendent up with the board, considering they're not elected officials, and for the board members to be able to see them with the rest of the cabinet members. So I personally don't like the idea of the superintendent being up here with the board, and think it's weird for other districts to have that. Like, I think Queen Creek is one of them. They've got their entire cabinet on the dais.
Yeah, I think that's a little different also, and like, I appreciate your comment, and certainly there's somewhat of a style issue, but there's also a practicality issue when the board president has questions about policy or procedure, that they can actually, you know, talk to one another or pass a note about, you know, have you looked at this policy? That, you know, that there's a practical standpoint too. But I do think there's a difference, my opinion, between your employee, the one employee you have, and the cabinet. It's a different responsibility. So that's Tim's opinion, right? But thank you. Moving on to communication protocols, the next page. Once again, your policy on feedback with regards to the chain of command and board policy KE and KEB are accentuated there. And then it's very appropriate under item 4 for board members to follow back with that superintendent to make sure that they have followed up and addressed concerns that have occurred. That's what you hire this person to do. Item 6, I know I saw on the agenda that there is some future discussion here on the agenda about board packet processing. You didn't ask me for my opinion, but I'll tell you that in a district as large and sophisticated as Higley, your superintendent and board president need more time not less, to get information to the board, closer to the board meeting. 5 days is a long time in the life of a school district. And so I would encourage you to kind of think through how that works procedurally for your staff. On the next page, there's some...
Board President Anderson, Mr. Ogle, I'm sorry, if you can explain that, you think 5 days is too long?
I think, my opinion, 5 days is too long. Things happen, personnel things happen, there's financial decisions being made, there's activities in the district, and my opinion is if you can get that board packet to board members closer to the board meeting, it gives your staff more time to more thoroughly prepare.
Got it. Thank you.
Board meeting protocols, there's some great information here with regards to respect of one another, following point of order, kinds of interruptions should that be necessary when there's debate going on, and providing the appropriate professional kind of environment that you've demonstrated here tonight. So on the last page, there's more information there on post-meeting protocols with confidentiality and executive sessions, and I just wanted to accentuate that. So all in all, I think the document, like I said, as developed in 2021, is ready for a refresh. And folks at these tables have spent some significant time kind of going through this piece by piece to bring you a recommendation that seems to make sense for the culture of Higley Unified. And with that being said, I'm happy to entertain any questions or to stop here and let the board take it from here. Madam President, your pleasure.
I do have questions, but I would like to open it up to other board members if they would like to ask or give information.
President Anderson, Mr. Ogle. So on page 2, the first bullet point, and for the last year, I believe that this has been an issue, and I'm hoping that going forward, that whether we agree or not, that there is a level of respect, especially when we're on the dais. And so I'm hoping that the sidebar conversations and the eye rolling is eliminated going forward, because that's been an issue for the past year. And then also the last bullet point, so as far as talking to the media, we are elected officials, and legally we do have that right to be able to speak to media without having to be essentially micromanaged by the superintendent. And obviously, when we do speak to the media, we can speak for ourselves and not the district. But I just wanted to point out that as elected officials, we do have that right. Do you have anything on that page before I move on to another page?
I do, but I have many pages.
Okay.
Board member, you're right, and however, when there are issues of highly complex and situational kinds of challenges that school districts are now facing, I believe that the district is more effective when it speaks with a singleton voice. Even though 5 board members all may have very different opinions about a particular incident or a particular item, you're speaking to tens of thousands of people. And for Higley to maintain its stellar reputation as an excellent district, your public needs to have confidence that the board superintendent team is working together, even if there's disagreement, because there's bound to be disagreement. And so you're right, as an elected official, you can do those things. And the upside, downside, in my opinion, is to coordinate your message because it builds trust with the community. I mean, that's what I think.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
For page 4, number 6B, one member's request for additional information results in all members receiving or having the same access to the information. At our last board meeting, I had brought up the ability for all board members to be able to have contact with legal. And I think that should also include legal advice. One of the things mentioned during that meeting was that it could potentially be an open meeting law violation if information is shared with the board. But no one board member should have any secret conversations with legal counsel without the rest of the board being able to have that same information. So I'd like to be able to see legal advice added to that verbiage as well, because if one board member is asking, I think it would be beneficial for all of us to have that information.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And my recommendation would be that you authorize the board president to be the representative to talk to legal counsel.
Right, and that's the current policy.
Okay.
But being able to share with the rest of the board is what I'd like to be able to see in this protocol.
And that's part, kind of as an overview, that's part of that team of 6. We're a team of 6, right? And we want to all have the same information. We want to be able to act in good conscience so we know, kind of where we're going from here with regards to those things that are highly complicated.
Right. And same would apply, I know there's, personnel situations where the superintendent would contact legal, and obviously that's not our business. But anything that's board related, it would potentially include the superintendent as well to let us know that information.
Would that information come from the legal personnel at that point, not from the board president? How would that best be communicated?
Different general counsels and board presidents, may have different modes of communication, so to speak. And you have an excellent general counsel here tonight, and that's an issue that you would want to have coordinated with the superintendent, board president, and general counsel. Yeah. And there's no one way to do it, as long as those 3 individuals are on the same page. And then, to our previous point, all board members are included kind of once it's appropriate to share, right?
She said executive session, and absolutely, that's one of the avenues.
Be communicated is during executive session, correct? Okay, thank you.
And going back to page 2, as far as confidentiality, there have been several instances where information has been leaked from executive session and it's ended up on social media. There's at least 2 instances that I'm aware of, and that's extremely concerning for me. Another issue I have is, so when it comes to emails that we receive, I don't know what would be the protocol. I would assume that any type of information we receive through email or communication with the district, that information isn't just publicly shared. One example, I had submitted a press release to the media with my phone number on it, and a board member shared it with one of their friends and exposed my personal cell phone number to the public. and it was posted on social media within 20 minutes of the board receiving that press release. And then I started getting phone calls from parents, and that's absolutely unacceptable that was shared because the media wouldn't expose my phone number. I put my phone number on there for the media if they needed to contact me. But Ms. Richards shared that press release with the board at 11:01. By 11:28, it was on social media. I had one parent, I was at work when she called me and I made the mistake of answering the phone, and then she just wouldn't get off the phone. So I want to ensure that there is something within our protocol that information should not be shared publicly without redactions being made, and that it should probably go through a public records request versus board members just sharing it with their friends within the community.
Can you provide clarification, Dr. Olga, I'm sorry, can you provide clarification? You asked a good question. If I recall from public records, we are considered custodians, or because we're elected officials, we are considered custodians of public records? Is that correct?
Yes. Ms. McLennan is an expert, a statewide expert on open meeting law.
Okay.
So thank you, Dr. Ogle and President Anderson. The districts, as public officers, the communications that you create that are about board business are public records. You're not necessarily the custodians of those public records because they are kept in the course and scope of your district's business so they would be kept on your district server, your district email. So the documents that are created are public records because you're public officials and it's about board business. If it's about your personal lives, then they're not considered public records, even if they're kept on the district server. I hope that answers.
So that's what I was trying to understand is we don't have the ability to share emails with anybody else, correct? That needs to go through the proper channels of the public records request through the district office, correct?
Madam President, members of the governing board, there isn't a prohibition that I'm aware of legally on you as board members sharing information that you receive unless there is a confidentiality provision that would apply. So if you got information about students, you could not share it. If you got information that's protected under HIPAA, you could not share it. But is there a state law that prohibits the sharing of information from board members? No. Would it be best to go through those protocols? Yes.
It's a risky road because you could potentially be sharing confidential information without being trained or going through the proper channels to redact or not share that information.
Correct.
Yeah, members of the board, when I'm training young superintendents on this topic, I typically kind of in a casual way say, when I was in the seat, I never put anything in an email that I wasn't comfortable reading on the front page of the newspaper, because you just don't know. Right? You just don't know where it might go once it's written and electronically sound.
And President Anderson, Mr. Ogle, and obviously my press release was public. It was just my phone number that I was concerned that was made publicized, and that should not have been, because that was only meant for the press to be able to contact me. Ms. McClellan, can you remind the board of what are the consequences of violating open meeting laws when it comes to executive sessions?
Sure. Madam President, Ms. Van Hook, the open meeting law enforcement team is typically run out of the Attorney General's office, although it can also be other state agencies that look into concerns. With a first violation, they typically would not impose a fine, but would impose training. Sometimes they have items posted, other options. A second violation, a second knowing violation, is a $500 fine, and that's per violation. And then a third would be up to a $2,500 fine.
And also the possibility of being unseated, correct?
Madam President, Ms. Van Hook, you're correct. The Attorney General's office has the ability to request that a court remove a public officer through an enforcement action.
Thank you so much.
Do you have more, Ms. Van Hook? No, okay. Okay.
So President Anderson, and Dr. Ogle, I wish to extend my gratitude. I was the one who asked to, start looking at some of these things because I think it matters. I think consistency matters. Even though we will have disagreements and those types of things, how we present that information is important because being united essentially towards some of that thing is helpful for us to do business in the district and the community and how we're viewed beyond. I think the only thing that I wish to express is that even though we may have the rights to do certain things with respect to media, I think it's very easy for us to get into a position that is difficult if we're commenting on things in a public fashion because it could very quickly become an agenda item. And then the problem is if one board member makes a comment on something and then another board member makes the same comment on something, and if other board members can view it, I recognize these are gray areas and that these laws were written originally before social media's existence, but there's a lot of potential problems that exist. I wish to extend gratitude to Board Member Schultz in the manner with which you brought up something that you cared about in terms of instead of just doing it, putting it to the board first so we can have a discussion rather than putting it out there in a way that either A, we were aware of, or B, as if it doesn't matter to check with us because, again, we are part of a board as a whole. And I also think it's important to understand that when we make public statements, whether that is because we have a desire to clarify what is being misunderstood by the public or to clarify a position that we held or how we feel about something, while I understand the desire to do so, I think the hard part is that how it gets viewed is that we all are in the position to be able to do that, and again, we can't. We can't all make a public statement on something outside of a board meeting. That's part of the reason that these board meetings exist. And then it puts your fellow board members in a very difficult position because now we have to sit and express to people that I genuinely do care about what's going on, or I do have frustrations, or I do wish to communicate something, and either I will at the board meeting when the issue arises, or I already have and I can't speak to that. And so I think it's important to recognize that sometimes even though we may wish to do certain things or how we wish to go about them, that our actions go beyond just us in that moment. And it's not necessarily in efforts of being a courteous and respectful board to put other people in a position that not only runs the consequence of legal ramifications, but of painting a picture that is hard when you're not a part of the conversation.
President Anderson? I'm glad we're having these conversations. And there's a couple things that I try and ask myself as a board member before doing something, saying something. Because I can doesn't mean I should. And so, I have to go through and think about those things because there's a lot I can do. But should I? What are the, Board Member Wade was saying, what are the consequences, not just to me, but to my fellow board members, to the district, to the staff within the district. And I think that we'll work on our relationships and our communication. I agree in all aspects of it, and I think if there is a need that we have to put something out publicly, I think that conversation needs to be had with the superintendent and say, look, I feel very passionate about this. This is what I would like to do. Can we do something together? And not in a threatening way, but this is the information I'm going to put out there. So we can work together or it's going to ride. And so I think that if we work on our relationships, just like we talked about in our board retreat, I think that we can avoid some stuff that we fell into this last year. I do, Dr. Ogle, I'm kind of back on number 6A, where you were talking about giving the district time, more time to prepare. And we've had this conversation as a board, and I hear you, but as board members, we need time to prepare too. And so I don't know what the right answer is. I think most people know, yes, we're elected, but these are volunteer positions. We're not paid for it. We're not compensated for it. Several of us have jobs, employment outside of the home. And so trying to, as we try and encourage our staff to try and have a work-life balance, we're trying, some board members are trying to have a work-life and volunteer balance, and I get we've put ourselves in these positions. And so I don't know what the right answer is, because part of our 5 days includes the weekend. So it's not like we're asking for it to be on Monday and they have 5 working days per se. Trust me, I know you guys work on the weekends. I'm not saying you don't. But that, and that then we're meeting on Friday. We're asking to get them on Thursday so that we can be prepared on our meetings on Wednesday. But part of this is, one of our protocols was that we would be, if we have questions, because we established this back in 2021, if we have questions on our board packet, we're needing to submit those to the governing board secretary by a certain time, so they have time to research them, and that they can get that information back to all board members, as well as then they're prepared for the questions to come up in our meeting. So we're really trying not to blindside anybody. So I guess for me, my concern, and I'm just looking for some feedback here, is if we're already having, that really only leaves us 3 days to review our board packet before we need to get them questions. So they have 2 days to research and provide answers, and then that way it gives us hopefully a little bit of time that, I find a lot of times the questions, when I get the questions and answers, then that's created some more questions for me. And so, what has been your experience in that? Did you guys do questions and answers, or?
Well, one practice that I have seen effectively done is to intermittently have working sessions so that the board meeting becomes just a business meeting. And you have your informational kinds of discussions and information presentations at your working sessions, so that all board members are receiving reports from senior staff. You're getting updates on things that are pertinent to decisions that are yet to be made. So when they come to the board table on an agenda, you're already familiar with it. And that's the purpose that some districts with a lot of complexity, like Higley, that's how they kind of sort through incrementally moving boards towards decision-making. And some of the veteran superintendents will tell you that you don't want your board voting on things that they haven't seen once or twice before, right? And so if you do a working session, once a month to do those kind of things, then when the business meeting comes along, it's move to approve kind of thing. And it takes that that pressure off of, I gotta have, if you're a superintendent, I gotta have this board packet ready, a week before the board meeting. Well, and 10 things are gonna happen after I make the board packet. And so there's that stress on your superintendent. And the stress for the board member is, I really don't want to vote on things I'm not familiar with, right? And so therein lies the art form.
So once upon a time, long, long ago, we did used to do, I just lost the word.
Work studies.
A work study before the meeting, and this kind of goes back to some of the comments regarding our time that we start. Our work studies used to start at 5, and then our board meeting would start at 6. So we would have an hour that we would get some presentations and information, and it would be a rather casual conversation. We could ask questions. If they didn't know the answers, then, and things like that. The problem with that, and kind of why it got changed is that long, long ago, is we were being introduced to information for the first time in that work study and then being expected to come out here and vote on it. And it was like, that was 12 years ago when I got on the board, and it's like, you're asking me to process, just like you said, you're asking me to process something I'm getting this 20-slide presentation on. You're asking me to try and go through every scenario and process it, and then less than an hour go out here and vote on it. So as we changed superintendents, we kind of changed that structure a little bit. And we had the intent on kind of every other meeting that we were having is kind of an informational thing, but there is board business that has to be conducted at every meeting. And so that's kind of where we see those informational items. On some board packets, we're heavier on informational items than we are on action items. So that might be something going forward that we look at doing again if we're going to do a work study. Again, it's where our informational items are. We can ask questions and things like that. A lot of our presentations, and that can be from 5 to 6, and then look at starting our board meetings and doing our board business after 6 o'clock. That's how we used to run them. And then, like I said, when we ended up changing some things and they tried to change the work study and kind of incorporate it in every other meeting. And that's how we got to, we were still starting at 5 o'clock. We were trying to respect the staff who have been here and worked all day and then have to return the next day as well. Right. So things like that. So there was a lot of different reasons how that's changed. So thank you for that suggestion that perhaps we can look at doing some work studies, and then, like you said, the pressure of us getting that so early to be able to try and do our own research and information so we're prepared and so that they're prepared, that might change some of that dynamic.
Right, and complicated issues need soak time. And so, and kind of back to some of the beginning comments that we were talking about, when that team of 6, right, board superintendent team can be so powerful when you're fitting hand in glove, and the board is getting the kind of information they need, and the superintendent is getting the feedback that he or she needs, and then board meetings become pleasurable business meetings, right, and you get your work done. And that doesn't mean there's not disagreement. I mean, differences of opinions are healthy. I mean, you have a diverse district and people voted for you. And so you're representing a wide variety of individuals, right? And differences of opinion at the board table, that's natural and healthy. But when you work as a team, you come to a decision and support the decision, right?
President Anderson, Mr. Ogle, one of the things that we discussed was having a working agenda so that as things are coming, as they get things, that they just add it, but they, if we were to agree to have the initial agenda released on Wednesday, and right now we're getting it on Thursday, so it's just, the request was just to add one more day, but that it would be a working agenda and they can add things as they go. That gives us the opportunity to at least research the stuff that's already been added. And, you know, as we go through the week, that if they need to add more stuff, that they're already doing that. For instance, we got our agenda on Thursday. When I looked on Friday, there was, all the numbers had been changed. And then when we got our Q&A back, they mentioned that several other items had been added. So it's already functioning like that. But if we can at least start Wednesday, that gives us board members an additional day to be able to start researching things so that, as Ms. Reese said, we are volunteers, and, you know, I work full-time, and so my weekends are, you know, my time with my family and to be able to run errands, and so that time is very important to me. Not that this is not important to me, because I do put a lot, this has become a full-time job for me as well. And I enjoy that. But so if that could be an option versus a work study, then we can consider that as well. Another thing Ms. Board Member Reese had mentioned was that obviously, you know, working on our relationships. And I hope to do that. The last year I've struggled because there's been many requests that have been ignored. I've been lied to. I've had to request things 3 or 4 times before I finally got an answer. So it's been very frustrating. And then, you know, the worst is finding out that I was lied to about something that I had questioned. And so in order to build that trust, I need to know that my questions aren't ignored, that I'm not being lied to, that, you know, be honest with me, whether I'd like the answer or not. I expect honesty and the same treatment that every board member gets. And I feel like I've been the odd one out, and the mistreatment has been pretty awful for the last year. So I do look forward to building those relationships and for things to improve going forward. That's all.
So being a board member is difficult work, and it's sometimes very challenging, but the rewards can be so great. And when it works and when it's working, it's really rewarding and very important to your community. And so you should be very proud of the work you're doing, and you should lean in and enjoy it. And it should be, at the end of the day, something that you're very proud of. And you know, you've got a great district, and you've got a great senior staff, and you can do this.
I appreciate all the information and sharing, being very candid in your feelings and ideas. Board Member Wade made a great point. I don't want to steal it from her, but steal away. She mentioned when we talk about the work study option possibilities, that it should potentially also shorten our actual meetings. You already discussed that that would be business-based and focus on business, so that's another added entitlement or bonus of it. With this, what we're going through, this is something that we have draft on it. So are we going to eventually approve this whole document? Is this what we're looking at? Because as we discuss the dissemination of information, that's already on the agenda for today. And now we're talking about time chains and maybe looking at work studies. So that would be a different item later on, a future agenda item before we finalize this whole document. Is that correct?
President Anderson, I did want to mention that Cabinet was looking at potential board meeting dates, and we have been talking about the potential value of work study sessions where there's conversation, and it doesn't feel rushed or so formal. So, I mean, we can bring our thoughts on that, and you can add your thoughts to that, all of you as well.
President Anderson, I just want to add 2 more things if I can, please. One, on page 6 for the after meeting protocols, the board members and staff will support the decision of the board. Like Dr. Ogle has said, you know, we don't always have to agree. And supporting the decision doesn't mean you voted for the item. But as board members, we have to respect that if at least 3 board members voted for it and it passes, that is what it is, and we have to respect that decision. And so one of our protocols here is that we'll support or stay silent. We're not saying you have to go out and be a cheerleader for it. Clearly, people know how we voted, but it's important that we support, once that direction has been approved by the board, that we support that direction and not undermine it, because it's really easy to fall in that trap. So I think that was really important when we created these. It is also part of being a board member, that is the expectation of being a board member. And the last thing I just want to kind of touch on in here is that we just as board members, we remember and how we have respecting our superintendent and each other. We need to respect our community and our staff that's presenting to us, that they deserve our attention when they're presenting. It's not even the people who get up and speak, and we've heard from multiple people when they come and speak, and they said, you know, oh, this is harder than I thought it was, that they're not public speakers. It is hard to get up there and talk. And so we need to respect our staff when they're giving us their presentations, even though we've seen it. And in some cases, there are times where we've seen the same one multiple times, either by law that we have to see it multiple times, or that it's information that is important that we've seen it multiple times. So I just want to remind each of us that they deserve our attention, our full attention, and that our phones and things like that should be kind of silenced, put away. So we all have families, and if we have something with an emergency, you know, we can always step out and handle that. So just a quick reminder, because that was also in our protocols.
President Anderson, Board Member Reese, do you know what page that was on? The updated, yeah, I would like to add any texting or personal communications during board meetings to the policy. And I've had concerns all last year due to repeated texting during board meetings, and sometimes even use of laptops and shopping online, or so I would like to include any personal communications not to happen during board meetings. And I think it didn't help when last year when we had, I forget his name, the ASBA attorney that attended and said, well, as long as it's, you know, if it's personal communication, it can't be, people can't do a public records request. But I think that, you know, if it's happening during a board meeting, it should be open to a public records request, or you should just not be doing it at all and be concentrating on what's happening at the board meeting.
It's on page 5 as our
on the original
meeting norms. And it's posted here too.
So Board Member Reese, are you asking potentially to put all those meeting norms back into this document, or Vice President Van Hook?
I would love it if we can add that verbiage into the new policy.
Protocol, you mean?
Oh, protocol, yeah, sorry.
It is listed as one of our meeting norms. I think our original document is a good point of reference. It's on page 5. Do I think that it all needs to necessarily be there? I don't know, but I do think that we spelled it out a little more. We do have them posted here at the dais as well for our meeting norms. To be on time, be present and participate, silence cell phones, and if emergency calls need to be taken, leave the room, listen attentively with openness and respect to those speaking, and voice concerns as we go. Be real and authentic with others in a respectful way is what our meeting norms are.
I would like to add, aside from just silencing cell phones, but no texting and no personal electronic use during board meetings.
Maybe putting our HUSD meeting norms in the protocols in our draft document. I don't think there's anything wrong with those. I think that's reasonable.
We can do that. I think it's a great idea. It definitely covers communication and protocols, so I think it's an excellent idea to put that in there. Just like with students, adults are the same. We're gonna have to say it. This has been sitting in front of me for 3 years now, and I forgot that it's even there. I've just seen it, and it's just left. So it's good to revisit and have it in there. Do we have any more comments, questions or comments you would like to discuss or recommend to add?
If we think of something, President Anderson, if we think of something later, can we, when do we expect to bring this back, do you know? Just to kind of have a time frame of how long we have to be able to.
Then, Miss Vice President Van Hook, I'm going to get it in a minute. I would like for us to bring your suggestions back at the next board meeting. So, because I think what Dr. Ogle said about, in terms of hiring a superintendent, I think that individual might like to have this put together with your support. So.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, this was excellent, I appreciate it, and thank you for recommending it, so that we have this time. Okay, we ready to move on? Item 6.3, first review of the fiscal year 2024 maintenance and operation budget. For Mr. Moore, please.
This one's working. Good evening, President Anderson, members of the board. Tonight I will be presenting the first review of the 2025 school year budget. So yes, we are already looking at next school year. This has been our practice to bring forth in January the first review looking at projections. As you know, it's become a very competitive market in terms of who can get out there first with teacher contracts. So what that means is it backs everybody up in the process. So that means HR has to have contracts reviewed. I have to have budget projections on. And so that is just the industry standard right now. So we have adopted our practices to bring forth the conversations regarding the fiscal 25 budget early in January for anticipated approval, tentative approval in March. So tonight we'll look at a first review. And I do want to give kudos. I get the pleasure of presenting this budget, but there's a finance team that assists me every day. And Sharon Rushkamp, she's stayed around. But I just want to show my appreciation to Sharon and all the help she does to keep this district fiscally sound in terms of staying positive in the black, and then also looking forward with new year numbers and projections. So let me see. There we go. Okay, so I have continued to bring forth a calendar to try to orient the board and the public on where we are in the budget process and where we're going. So the Arizona school budget timeline, these are the standardized dates in statute. Again, we kind of operate earlier to issue contracts earlier, but we'll be looking at two items today. We'll be looking at the FY24 revised budget, which is required by statute. Every district revises their current year budget to 100-day ADM numbers. We are current year funded. That 100-day, as Ms. Richards mentioned in the superintendent's report, just happened last Friday. So we have a preliminary look at those numbers. And then we're going to be looking at FY25, the proposed and adopted budget. That legally happens in June. Again, we bring that tentatively in March to issue contracts. But those are the two dates that we're going to be looking at today. And then going into next year, budget revision number 1 of 25 would happen in December if for some reason we were off more than 1% on what we adopted back in June. So constantly talking about budget. What we know so far about the FY25 budget is the following items. So the aggregate expenditure limit, this is a constant conversation. Currently, will school districts face this again in 25? There is no permanent fix right now, but it has, over the last 2 years, seemed to be a practice that the legislatures have utilized the AEL exemption, a single-year exemption in the budget conversations when either approving bills or in the legislative process. So I think I do foresee that being the case again this year. And hopefully it doesn't become a bargaining chip for some of the bills that are being proposed, but I do foresee that being approved. And there is some legislation out there that have permanent fixes to this problem. And so we'll monitor those closely as the process just kicked off in terms of the legislative process. So we'll monitor that. So in short, it's still in statute that we are expected to cut schools. We are currently overexpended $1.3 billion, but in short, I do see an exemption to 25 as is what has been practiced in the previous year. So we'll follow that. Known budget implications, the estimated budget inflation amount, the state is currently running about 3.4%. They minimally have to obligate 2%. And so we anticipate that being the case as it has been the case in the last couple of years. So that is utilized in these projected numbers. And a couple other notes, small minor changes. Arizona State Retirement System, while it increased last year, now they're decreasing this year, albeit 0.02%. That does affect both employees and employers, but that is a very small percentage and will not be affecting the budget in a large capacity. The alternative contribution rate took a bigger decrease. That is for retirees that have already retired from the state retirement system. They pay a lower rate. That's just under 10%. That is decreasing 0.2%. And lastly, our budget transfer estimates. Higley has utilized the ability to transfer M&O dollars to capital to fund capital projects with limited capital dollars. This has been our avenue in which we have utilized to fund those capital projects. Currently, we do have a middle school lease obligation of $3.5 million, and that's all that we are looking at currently to transfer from M&O to capital in fiscal 25. Again, we'll have a greater conversation at the next board meeting regarding capital projects and our capital budget, but that is the number we're using in the estimates tonight. One of the main formulas in the budget, in school district budget, is ADM, right? Student enrollment. That's one of the main multipliers. And so when we're looking at projecting 100-day ADM, at the time I did this presentation, we didn't have the exact numbers, but these are going to be relatively within a few students. What we're seeing is what we're seeing around all our neighbors, is some declining enrollment, mainly in the preschool and the kinder and the 8th through 8th grade. This graph represents, I've broken out both our kind of preschool through 8th grade and our 9th through 12th grade. And so if you look at the top, you'll see a trend over the last 5 years of, while we did have a spike in '22, generally declining enrollment in K-8. On the flip side, our secondary has seen an increase in enrollment, and that has been trending upwards over the last 5 years. But when you take those two numbers together, that is what we're funded on. We adopted a budget in June of ADM of 12,533.474. Again, average daily membership is not head count. You'll see the district utilizes kind of that interchangeably. Oftentimes you'll hear we have 13,500 students. Yes, because ADM, that doesn't include preschool. The preschool numbers here, we are only funded for SPED preschool students, and the state only funds 0.5 of a kindergarten student. So if we have 800 kindergarten students, only 400 are included in that ADM number. So important to note, whenever I'm referencing ADM, please, that does not mean we don't have those students in physical capacity when we reference student count at 1,305. So yes, we're only funded for 0.5 of a kindergartner, but we do offer full-day kindergarten. And back to the 100 days, so back in '24, we adopted a budget of 12,533. What we're looking at projecting for ADM is about 190 ADM lost, which is about negative 1.5% of our total ADM. Looking, again, district-wide, I said we are not immune to this problem. This has been a national trend in terms of either lower birth rates. Arizona is one of the more competitive states in terms of private education. Those aren't captured in these numbers. They're not required to submit up ADM. So when we look at our surrounding districts, again, we're not alone. Benjamin Franklin, Queen Creek, some of the far east, southeast parts of the valley where growth is still happening. You can see percentage changes in the positive, but more of our kind of central school districts that have aging populations are seeing enrollment decline. Okay, so looking at our current year budget and revision number 1, which would occur officially in May, but again, it has budget implications going into next year. Again, we adopted a budget of $124 million. Again, that was on June 28th. We transferred from M&O to capital $5.6 million. Part of that's to support the lease payment, and the other part to support additional capital projects that we've outlined in that capital plan. That budget did include a one-time state aid adjustment that we allocated towards capital, again, to support our capital projects, and it included an estimated budget balance carry forward of $23.7 million. Looking at our projected revision, again, we're projecting ADM loss of 190. That is the main multiplier in the budget formula. And so you'll see that's going to be one of the main indicators on why we'd be decreasing our current year budget. In addition, our M&O transferred capital, that would be the same, but our estimated budget balance carry forward is coming down greater than what we estimated back in June. So that is estimated at $22 million. So a combination of the estimated budget balance carry forward and the loss in ADM, in May we will be looking at decreasing our budget by $2.4 million. So that's one part of the equation. Looking towards 25's budget, so this is next school year, we take our estimated revised budget that we just reviewed. That would be, again, including that ADM loss and the reduction in budget balance carry forward. That totals about $122 million. Looking at the projected proposed budget, we feel, talking in cabinet, we feel it's prudent to start to budget for ADM loss. It has been a trend. And so if we do not proactively budget for loss and we assume a greater loss than flat or what we've been practicing, it puts us at risk for not being able to fund programs, staff, et cetera. And so it is, I think, at this point in time, prudent to start budgeting for a loss in enrollment so we can be conservative in our budget estimates and be able to support our programs for the extent of the fiscal year in which we adopt that budget. In addition, I talked about this in the highlights, but M&O transfer to capital, we would be proposing right now, reducing that to just fund the lease payment that we're obligated to make for our 2 middle schools. And currently, I know it's way far in advance, but we're currently tracking an estimated budget balance carry forward of $22 million. So we take those into consideration. That budget does include the 2% inflation. So if you're wondering why that's increasing, that does include the 2% inflation increase that we're anticipating from the state. We arrive at a budget of $125 million. So we take that increase minus the decrease, and we get a net budget change of about $1 million. The biggest factors in that, again, is reducing the M&O transfer to capital. So we're leaving more money back in M&O, and then the 2% inflation factor on 25. Looking ahead, it is 6 months out before we get to June. A lot of these conversations regarding the 25 budget are currently taking place. In terms of property casualty insurance, we did have good news the other day. We are eligible, this is our 3rd year with the trust, so we are eligible for a loyalty credit of up to 3% of our total premium obligation, so 3% on $800,000. So we do anticipate some savings actually in this category pending some of our other areas where we've seen increased usage, such as prepaid legal. That is a function of the property casualty insurance. So we're working on those renewal rates. We'll have more as we progress in this budget conversation. Workers' comp, unfortunately, we've seen some higher claims this year in terms of workers' compensation, but in the same token, workers' comp is paid under the trust, and it is also eligible for a loyalty credit. So we're hoping to receive a credit up to 3% of our workers' compensation insurance. And so we pay about $450,000 in workers' compensation, so that 3% is a big benefit to help offset any increases in that area. Utility increases, living in the town in Gilbert, I think you've heard about utility rates increasing. We are not immune to that. We will see the same increase, and so we're currently projecting out what those increases will mean to Higley Unified. And then our annual kind of compensation conversations in terms of FTE addition and reduction and classification. So we're currently looking at staffing with Ms. Karen Johnson and Cabinet. Obviously, with elementary decreasing, there may be opportunities right there to reduce sections at elementary. On the flip side, with secondary increasing, we may be adding sections on the secondary side. And so we're finalizing that conversation and those conversations right now. And we're looking at projected enrollment as well as where those reductions or additions will take place. So, and then after we get all that, we'll look at potential compensation increases and how that factors into the budget conversation. So I know not a lot of information there, but it's a factor of starting this conversation so early. But at the next meeting, kind of segueing, we anticipate having some more of these items filled out and having some numbers to look at. So at the February 21st meeting, we'll look at the second review of the M&O budget, as well as the first review of the capital budget. And then due in part to the superintendent search this year, we do have less board meetings in which to talk budget. I know we all love to talk budget, but so it'll be prudent if board members do have questions. I would say after the February meeting, if there is additional questions over time in which you wish to sit with me or Ms. Richards or Karen Johnson to schedule those, because we do have one less board meeting this year than in years past. So going to March 6th, we will ask for tentative approval so we can also issue contracts and get into the swing of things that all other districts are doing at that time, which is guaranteeing in terms of staff. That's our biggest budget factor, teachers and staff. And so if we do not issue contracts March 6th, we will be behind the 8 ball, and that will consequently hurt us in terms of staffing, retaining teachers, et cetera. And so at that time, we'll also look at the second review of the capital budget, if necessary. And then in April 3rd, our practice has been tentatively approving the capital budget to allow us to get ahead of those projects in the summer. Tentatively approving the capital budget allows us time to procure any long lead items that may be needed or may be scheduled for construction during those summer times when there is no students in class. We have access to the entire facility without disrupting learning and education. So, and then as I mentioned in the previous timeline, officially we'll bring back the proposed and adopted budget as outlined in statute. A lot of those numbers we foresee not changing from the March 6th meeting, but if they do, we will highlight those at that time. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
President Anderson, I'm concerned that, so you mentioned that the expectation is that they're going to lift that AAL again. But what if they don't? Then what do we do in that case?
I think the district has, looking at this year's budget, we have worked on, in terms of obligating ESSER dollars to not positions. We have used to one-time cost. There was opportunities to supplement operational cost in the last couple of years with the ESSER dollars. That is running out in June, but we have accumulated a budget balance carry forward of 23 million, and we're estimating it coming down slightly, but to 22 million. So in any instance, we are still covered if AEL were to come to fruition, because the estimated budget reduction would be about 16 to 17 million that we would have to reduce our budget. So we could easily cover that with our budget balance carry forward and continue operations as planned.
And how long do we forecast for? Like how far out?
So currently the state funds us on current year funding. So we're constantly looking ahead, but then revising current year. So we forecast out 3 to 5 years, but those numbers are constantly being estimated and changed. Enrollment can change daily, and then that affects our current year budget, which then is a vicious cycle down the road. So we do forecast, I personally forecast 3 to 5 years out. Yeah, sure.
I'm used to forecasting 9 years out, so I completely understand how that could change. My question then is, right now, obviously, with birth rate being down and impacting K through 6, looking at the future and those, as these kids get older and, you know, our high schoolers graduate, and as these kids move forward, you see those numbers decreasing in middle school and high school, and hopefully by then we have, you know, more people having kids to fill our K through 6. But are you counting in those future years, are you counting that current decrease moving on to middle school and high school?
That is one factor we look at. One issue we have very special programs in our district, one being Bridges, and then our high school programs attract a number of students outside our district. We attract almost 2,000 students outside our boundaries. We see a lot of those come in to our secondary levels. They may not be currently enrolled, and then they enroll as freshmen because we offer a number of programs that cannot be met with either neighboring districts or that is either we see them going from private school or homeschool to the secondary level, and that is nearly impossible to predict. We have trending data, but it's just a variable that is very hard to predict. And with ESAs coming into the picture now too, it has changed the landscape of enrollment prediction because not only are we seeing decreases, charters are seeing decreases. And so we're assuming those kids are going to private or some other form of education, or I mean, in general, the general student body population of qualified, you know, kids K-12 is decreasing too. So that is why we're starting to project ADM decrease in our budget cycle now to account for some of those instances of aging out, you know, grading out. When we run, you know, a kinder class through 12th grade, we know when you're bringing in a smaller kinder class, that's going to move up the ladder. So that is one factor, but there's other factors that kind of convolute that formula. It's not one simple formula.
Got it. And for homeschoolers within our district, so I know like homeschool kids have the ability to come and utilize our sports. Do we get any funding? I don't even know if we have any of those students, but we don't get funding for those kids?
No, but I think in sports, I would have to refer to Mr. Lotzenheiser. I don't think we currently allow that as a practice.
So there's two different things that are at play here. One is the traditional homeschool student who's registered with the county. We do not get any funding for those at all. They have to pay the fees that we have, but we do not get any additional funding. The second part with the ESAs, students that are on ESA, our current practice is that we treat them similarly to a homeschool, which is what the AIA direction was. There are conversations right now about that possibly changing through the AIA, but that has not moved any further. Some other districts have started to charge them the true cost of doing how much it costs to have an athlete participate, because it's not just, our fees does not cover everything, transportation, coaching, equipment, electricity, everything. We have not brought that forward. There are two districts that I know of, Gilbert and Mesa, that do charge students who are on ESAs if they want to participate in our athletics above and beyond the fee that we charge them. For example, at our meeting today, it was discussed that if you live in Gilbert's boundaries, and you're on an ESA, that you were charged $1,250 to participate in a sport above and beyond their pay-to-play fee, because that's the true cost of what happens for their athletics. So those are some discussions that we can have, and I can bring back to Tyler and Finance Cabinet to propose if that is a situation. But currently, we are charging them the athletic fee the same way we would do to a student who's within our boundaries.
Thank you. Yeah, my understanding was if you're on ESA, you can't participate in local district sports. Only actual homeschoolers can do that. But I don't know if that changed from last time.
The IA made a recommendation last year at the beginning of the year, basically that if a parent can prove that they're on an ESA, because the problem is if you're on an ESA, you cannot get an affidavit for a homeschool. And so we've only had the instance of one student so far within our district. And so when we looked at it, they had to verify to us that they were not going to a private school. Because if you attend a private or a charter or any other or an online school, that is not the same thing as being homeschooled. Those people are not allowed to participate. Once we had that verification, we charge them the fee. And we have to verify they live in our boundaries. And they have to go to the school of the boundary that they live in order to participate. So we've had that happen one time so far this year.
Thank you. Yeah, because once you accept ESA, you're no longer considered a homeschooler, you're considered a home educator. So that definitely changes things. Is it possible to get a list of like all the kids that are within our district that are on ESA or that are out of boundary? Just all the different, or is that something that I can pull myself from?
I think ADE makes public the ESAs, but I haven't been able to pull that information. But they do, ADE does have a list of showing how many students are coming into Higley Unified and how many students are going to other districts such as Chandler, Gilbert, Queen Creek, et cetera, that live within our boundaries. So,
and that's the information that you do have?
Yeah, that's public on ADE. We can certainly
okay.
share that link with the governing board.
Perfect. I can pull it. Thank you. And I want to say Maricopa County Superintendent's Office could probably provide the ESA numbers, but I'll find out. And then also I had asked for the totals as far as the funding per student, and I didn't get those final numbers that included not just base, but also with transportation and federal funding and all the other funding that we get per student.
Yeah, so Member Van Hook, we did provide you that information. We did not provide you information that included federal and state grants, as it's not a per pupil. It doesn't affect the total population. So when you get federal funding you get that for specific needs, such as special education, Title students, it's targeted funding to help support those students who have a higher need basically more assistance. And so that would not be, in my opinion, applicable when you include that into the total conversation or total budget of the district and kind of divide that by our total student population. Now you're taking that federal funding and applying it to other students it may not apply. So
And I know it differs for 504 and IEPs and things like that, but so we have state funding, but then we also have property tax, local funding. So even if you can't include the federal amount, are you able to provide at least local and state funding totals? Because the last I saw it was like $4,700, which would be the base, and then we have the additional, all the other funding that's on top of that.
So I believe we provided, I think in one of the last statuses, an updated, and it included not only all our state funding is our property taxes. Those are one and the same. What we do with our budget is levied by the state on our property tax base. So what we adopt what the board adopts is levied to all our taxpayers, so that is state funding. Like there's no additional state funding we get on top of our levied budget.
Right, but that $4,700 does not include
Well, so what I was getting to, what we did provide that included our capital funding, our M&O override, and those were the three sources. So our M&O capital and our M&O override are the three sources that apply to every single student in our district. We excluded.
I'll have to look for that. I'm sorry.
I can resend it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore and Board Member Van Hook, I believe the meeting at the very least that we talked about it is when we talked about the potential of looking at, do we do another M&O override this year and a bond? Because that's some of the funding differences and how some of the M&Os are coming up to like lapse and those types of things. And so I think that was potentially why it got lost in the mix, just because we were talking about a lot of stuff at that time. But I'm assuming too, when we talk more about that in the future meetings, because we have to address whether or not we're going to do those this year, that will come up as well.
Yeah, and I can give you those numbers and status, but yeah.
And President Anderson, Mr. Moore, I do want to mention that I recently had the opportunity to tour the North Water Treatment in Gilbert, which services our entire district because it covers from the 60 all the way to Germain. And one of the things that I inquired while I was there about was how the rate increase is going to impact our district. And it was interesting to find out that, so the difference between how the schools pay for water compared to how we pay for water at home is that schools pay a flat rate. But there's two different flat rates. One of them is for internal water use and the other one is external. So there's two different rates, but they are flat rates, whether you use 500 gallons or 1,000 gallons. It's a flat rate that's charged to the school. I'm sorry?
Did they base that off size? Is that what
It's just a flat rate for every school.
So we pay the same as Gilbert and Mesa?
Yeah, every individual school. Yeah, it doesn't matter the amount of gallons you use per school. Yeah, so that was something nice to be able to tour and also learn as far as how that funding impacts us. That's all I want to share.
So to clarify, you were saying that it's a flat rate, it's the same flat rate for every single school district, no matter the size of the school district?
Within Gilbert, town of Gilbert, yeah. and different versus internal use and external use. Well, and then, you look at the number of schools is where it differs, right? Gilbert has more schools, so they pay more, where we only pay for the schools that we have.
So, sorry, just to make sure I'm understanding and not unjustly getting angry for no reason.
It's not per district,
I just
it's
want to
per
make sure.
school.
So it's per school that we have.
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
Yes.
That makes me feel better. That's more egalitarian.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's per schools. That's all, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from Mr. Moore? Under the inflation, is that where the minimum wage increase, is that fall under there? Or is that going to be something to consider down the road for this school year, or anything that we need to be concerned about?
President Anderson, the state does not fund us to maintain the minimum wage. We're just held to fund. That's a kind of unfunded mandate. Currently, we're trending ahead of the minimum wage right now. The minimum wage is, as of January 1st, $14.35. Our current lowest classified hourly salary is $14.85. So the district has been proactive in increasing all employee groups up to stay ahead of that and avoid compression, as well as changing mid-year and trying to fund that lower tier group to minimum wage, to meet the minimum wage standard. So, but that inflation projected in the budget is not meant for that purpose. Inflation is a state formula where if the state realizes over 2% inflation, they're obligated to inflate the per pupil student count by 2%. So that's the factor there. So, but for the district to maintain minimum wage, that is an unfunded mandate that every employer in the state has to meet.
Thank you. A quick read, just that some people would put inflation and the minimum wage together, so I just wanted information about that. Thank you. We ready to move on? Yeah. All right. Moving on to 6.4, BDA Board Organizational Meeting Policy First Read.
Madam President, members of the board, on the agenda tonight, we have a first read of policy BDA, Board Organizational Meeting. There was some changes, Ms. Van Hook pointed out as well. ARS 15-321 was updated to eliminate the restriction of having a board meeting between January 1st and 15th. So we were able to comply with that tonight by having our board meeting just in January as the language in the law prescribed. In addition to that, we looked at our policy. It hadn't been updated since January of 2011. So in addition to that language, we cleaned it up a little bit and made it more concise, added some more precise legal language, and that's what we bring forward tonight as the first read.
Questions or comments for our staff? Thank you. Moving on to our action items, 7.1. Sorry.
No, my bad. Go ahead.
Okay. 7.1, I move to approve the proposed changes to policy JK, student discipline.
Second.
Any questions or comments regarding what's in front of us?
President Anderson?
Yes.
I guess I have a legal question. I know we had some discussion about this at our last meeting. It's crossed out that the superintendent shall recommend policies, and I know that there was some conversation with the ARS. Can it still not indicate that, since the superintendent, that the board designates the superintendent to do that?
Madam President, Ms. Reese, either sentence is correct. Legally, you can have either sentence. You could have the sentence as it currently reads, which is the superintendent shall recommend policies and develop procedures, or you can have the sentence that reads the governing board in consultation shall prescribe rules. So the second sentence that is currently added here is an accurate reflection of the law, but you do, as a matter of fact, prescribe the rules because you adopt the student code of conduct.
Okay, so if, like I said, I know we had some discussion about this before, and it indicates the governing board in consultation with teachers and parents of the school district shall prescribe rules for the discipline, suspension, and expulsion of pupils to comply with the ARS. And, you know, reviewing this again, and we talked a little bit about it tonight in our protocols, is that our role is to approve policy, and we employ a superintendent, and their role is to propose policy, I guess, if you will. Policy development and recommendations is the superintendent's role, and the board member's role is to approve policy and review procedures. So, in this instance, and we've had even some conversation tonight, for me as a board member, I'm not comfortable with consultation with teachers and parents of the district to be determining student discipline. Like, that is, I'm not the expert in that area. I'm not Mr. Walker, who attends different conferences, who's up to date on current practices. I mean, those are people we employ within the district to rely on to provide that information. Now, is it a reasonable expectation that information that they're finding and things like that, that we are having conversation with our teachers? And I think some of our student discipline is talked about in meet and confer. Different things that, should we be seeking that feedback? Should we be seeking some community forums and some feedback? Sure, but the way this is worded is the governing board in consultation with teachers and parents. I'm not the expert in that. And that, I don't feel that should be up to me to gather and create that information. I think for me, as a board member, my role is to rely on our experts and our staff to formulate appropriate current policies to bring forward to the board. And I don't see why the board can't have conversation. We have had conversation. I'm not going to bring up the word because the word is a buzzword and it means different things, but we've had some conversation about different discipline methods. And so that is conversation where the board can participate, can give input. That's why I was asking from a legal question. I get that that's the exact wording out of the ARS, but for me as a board member, we employ and our superintendent is our designee to act in that behalf because that is part of the day-to-day duties. So that's why I was asking that clarification.
President Anderson, Board Member Reese, whether we like it or not, that's state law. So whether we implement that into the policy or not, it's still state law, and so we're responsible for it ultimately. When it comes to student discipline,
well, that's why I was asking the legal question is, are governing board members expected to do this, or are governing board members expected to or permitted to have their superintendent as their designee to do this?
Madam President, Ms. Reese, there are inherent difficulties in the governing board directly soliciting the input of teachers and parents other than through a public meeting. Again, soliciting the input, for instance, when you have there's a statutory requirement that you get input from teachers on definition of inadequate classroom performance, but that's satisfied by you holding public comment when you adopt that board policy. I think the same would likely be true here. So to answer your question directly, can this board designate that statutory duty to the superintendent? Yes, as long as you are receiving public comment when you are considering the adoption of the student code of conduct or your discipline policies?
Because it still comes to the board for approval, and I mean, we are still the governing body that approves the policy. I just don't see the governing body creating the policy.
So I think what you're saying is that you don't see the governing body being the ones who has to directly solicit that input, and I agree with you.
President Anderson, Ms. McClellan, so can we maybe add verbiage, leave the red line as it is, but then add some verbiage that once we do have the opportunity to have public comment and hear parents, then we direct the superintendent to, I guess, work on the policy and to develop the policy and procedures for board approval. Because the policy references the statute, so I think it's important that the policy reference the language that's within the statute. But we can then add to the policy to say, once that's done, as our role as governing board, based on the law, that we can then designate the superintendent to develop the policy based on those conversations.
I think that there is a way to put these together. I think there is a working relationship. Ms. Richards, correct me if I'm wrong, that's already in place. Like, I've had meetings with you and Dr. Foley where I brought concerns that came from parents or staff and said, hey, does this fit the policy we have? Do we need to change it? And in which, again, correct me if I'm wrong, you said, and I believe Karen, sorry, Ms. Johnson, you were there, then you would take it to the committee, you would take it to legal counsel, and then bring it back for the board. So I think we have that in place. It's just getting that language correct on the policy. I agree that legally we are given this through statute, but I personally, one board member, feel that it really, I don't want that burden of creating discipline or any rules that go to students. But I think together we do take into account parents and students and staff and work with the superintendent and make these policy changes. So is there a better way, as Ms. Van Hook was saying and Ms. Reese was saying, that we can verbalize that?
I wonder if, again, from a legal satisfaction standpoint, if the governing board, and then whether it's parentheses, through the designation of the superintendent, if that were to just follow the governing board through the designation of the superintendent, or.
So, Madam President, Ms. Reese, perhaps you could do two things. You could add back in the first sentence and put it after the added sentence. So it would start, the governing board in consultation shall prescribe the rules in compliance with ARS 15843. The superintendent shall recommend and develop procedures for the discipline of students. So just add that sentence back in after the statutory recitation.
I'd be good with that.
Do we need a motion for that sentence?
So you have had a motion, so you would need to make an amended motion to revise governing board policy JK as discussed and approve it.
I'd like, go ahead. I'd like to make a motion to amend. We're amending, right? Amend the policy to add back in the strikeout. The superintendent shall recommend policies and develop procedures for discipline of students after ARS 15-843.
Seconded.
I'm like, I thought we just discussed this. Okay.
Stated accurately, correct? So we can now vote.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, so motion and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Now we need to actually vote on the policy with the amendment.
So do we have to make a second motion?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
So we approve the amended version. Now we have to motion to approve again?
No, you had a motion to approve the amended
good.
version. You never voted on the first motion, so you made an amended motion, so you're fine procedurally.
Thank you. All right, moving on to action item 7.2. I move that the governing board take action on the proposed changes, taking in, can we put it back so I can read the screen? I like to pretend like I know how to do this. I'm going to learn. Just reading here, right? Well, it was different than what's here.
I'm sorry, did you make a motion?
Nope,
No.
not yet. I move that we approve policy BEDBA, agenda preparation and dissemination, the second read with the changes brought forward.
I second.
Any questions or comments on this?
President Anderson?
Yes.
Reading this, I want to indicate that the district administration does not support these proposed changes, indicating that it is a procedure, not a policy. On the preparation.
Board member, President Anderson, Board Member Reese, but it's already a policy. So do we just completely eliminate, well, we can eliminate this because the protocols actually reference BEDBA.
We can eliminate the change. The policy itself is there. Instead of changing the wording in the policy of the 5 days, that's our expected protocols, that the policy itself doesn't need to be changed because the policy does meet the 24-hour requirement that's required by law, that the board packet or the board agenda, things like that, has to be posted no less than 24 hours. So it's referencing that, and that we would get that. And essentially, 24 hours, at the 24-hour mark, they can't make any changes. If there's changes made, it has to be done in the meeting. So,
So we never, I mean, we had the discussion, obviously, as far as updating the protocols, but we never really agreed on the day.
I feel like it's still a work in progress because we're still trying to determine if work studies are going to come in or if we're going to modify this that's constantly, causing stress. So in that case, do we even want to vote this evening?
We have to vote.
there's a motion. It doesn't mean we approve it, though.
Yeah.
If we don't approve it, if we deny it, then the policy stays as it is.
Okay.
And the policy's still there, nothing, and it just stays as it was prior to any changes. And as we talk through our protocols and as we talk through potentially making some changes where information's a little easier to get or there's not such a time deadline, things like that, so.
And to note, it could also be brought up again to be changed later after those discussions and those types of things, yeah.
Absolutely, it can be brought up at any time.
I'm sorry. Have we actually looked or reached out to other districts to see exactly how they do it? I'm sure there is differences amongst the districts around us, or maybe there are some similarities, but it sounded like Dr. Ogle said that it wasn't very similar to what we do in most cases, so I didn't know if we'd actually our district reached out to other districts and say, how are you all doing this? Since this is fairly new, and it was a great idea from Ms. Reese and her team back in the day to be transparent with information and get the information out there.
President Anderson, no, we didn't call and find out or look it up. However, we were committed to the practice like you see in the communication protocols. But for example, we felt the need to provide the statement this evening on teen violence. And we hadn't had time to talk as leadership to even write that. So it would have been pushed till February. But we were able to get it in the 24-hour time block, but not the, 5-day. That's just an example. We're working really hard to get things done on time, but that's an example. And Ms. McLennan may have input.
Well, I can give you examples from 2 unified school districts that I work with. So Scottsdale Unified, they try very hard to get their board members a draft agenda the Friday before their Tuesday meetings, but they make substantial revisions on Monday, and then it's posted within that 24-hour period. Dysart Unified has board meetings on Thursday, and my experience has been that they're typically trying to get the information to the board by Monday of that same week, and then we'll publish the final agenda on within the 24-hour period. Those are just the 2 that I work most closely with.
And President Anderson, I don't know how many also have the same procedure that go through, email their questions to their board secretary.
None. I know,
and things like that. I know a lot of times they save their questions for the actual board meetings, and there's nothing wrong with that. Collectively, when we did our protocols and things like that, through our protocols, that was an agreement to try and not put our staff on the spot. It doesn't mean we can't ask these same questions in the board meeting. It's just, if we have questions, they may not know the answer right off the top of their head. It gives them a little time to research it. So we're just trying not to put any of our staff members on the spot and give them time to be able to answer them. Otherwise, during your meeting, there could be a lot of, I don't know, I'll have to check into it and get back to you. And if it's a voting item, well, I don't have time for you to check into that and get back to me if we're voting on it. So I think that's where a little bit of the difference comes in. And I think for the most part, we've agreed that if we know the majority of the draft is there, that we can start, that we can be looking at it, that if we're just notified that there's been a change, there's been an update, I think most of that is fine, that we know to go in and take a look. Because I really don't want to, me personally, I wouldn't want to get rid of our little question and answer process, because I think it's very helpful. The other thing is, too, the amount of questions and stuff like that. When you have new board members, there's a learning curve. There's a lot of information that goes on that people just don't realize. And so, as we talked about at the last board meeting, too, is maybe if there's, and depends on if we look at doing work studies and stuff like that, that if there is a way that we can prioritize voting questions and non-voting questions, for information, I think that, but that's something we're still talking about, because our board packets are full of a ton of information, and we seek to understand, and it may not be on a voting item. The answer may be more informational, not determination on how I'm going to vote. I would just like to better understand this, and so that would take some of that pressure off too. So if people, I think that's where we're dealing with a little bit of different just perspective, is because we do have that question and answer period, and we're trying to get time for us to go through it, because in all actuality, really, we have 3 days to go through it, which is no different than these other boards. It's just our 3 days is so that we have time to get the information and questions to our staff. So if we all held our questions until the meeting, I mean, I don't think that would, I think we would fall right in line with what other districts are doing. I think the reason we're asking for a little more time is because we made that agreement previously to try not to catch anyone off guard so that they can answer it and so that we can have the information ahead of time. So,
President Anderson, also, I do know that many in other districts are actually jealous of our Q&A because they would love to be able to have that within their district. I also wanted to, in order to, for future board members that come on board, because these Q&As are saved on the website instead of board docs, there's no ability to be able to do word searches, for instance, within those Q&As. And I think it would be helpful to be able to do a word search, kind of like what we can do in board docs, and we can do keyword searches and things would pop up. So for future board members that come on board, it would be helpful if there was that search feature that they can search through those Q&As and be able to look up certain words and then be able to get their answer, and that would prevent that question from coming up again. And so I don't know if that's something that we can maybe move to board docs to allow that search feature, keyword search, versus the website, because I don't know if the website has that ability.
Madam President, I think we're a little bit beyond the agenda topic talking about the.
Well, it just goes along with the whole, yes, but I understand. So we can move forward.
Of the two districts that you mentioned, Ms. McClendon, did they have work studies?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
Did they have work studies, the two districts that you mentioned?
They do have work studies.
Okay, so that shorter time frame would work for them because they have that conversation.
Correct.
So we are not ready to approve. Oh, I'm not going to speak for you. We have to vote. Correct. So we're moving forward. And have I motioned yet? Anybody?
We've seconded, we did all that.
Madam President, you did make a motion and it was
you.
seconded. So
It's easy to write this down and I don't have it. All right. All those in favor? All those opposed?
nay.
Nay.
Nay. I say motion fails, or is that the language? Sure. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 8, future agenda items.
Nope, we're on 7.3.
Wow, I'm sorry, everybody. Discuss the date, 7.3, action item, discuss date for superintendent search, first round interviews. Who's? Hook, this was you.
President Anderson. So I asked for this to be put on the agenda because our last board meeting, I don't remember the date, whether it was last one or a retreat prior to that, we had extensively discussed the date and time for that meeting to do our first round interviews. Everybody acknowledged the fact, you know, as far as our work schedules, and I think at that point, I think we had shut the cameras off, so I don't think it was recorded. But we discussed that with my work schedule, I don't get paid for taking the time off. So we had agreed at 1:30 p.m. To have the meeting. And then we got an email saying a couple board members had a conflict and, would you be okay to moving the date to February 1st? I asked, what kind of conflict it was that caused the change, because I had already discussed with my boss to take the time off to be there on January 31st. And ultimately, I said, I would prefer for it to remain on the 31st at 1:30 because it's not easy for me to change my schedule. And then a few days later, we get an email saying the date's been changed. The consensus is everybody wants February 1st, and now it's 8:30 in the morning. And with my job, my phone rings all day. Even if this call is on Zoom, as I'm sitting in my office, there's no way I can concentrate and be able to work at the same time because my phone is nonstop. So I asked that we come back to have this discussion, and as Board Member Reese stated, there's 3 of us that work outside of the home, but 2 are self-employed and 2 that, as far as I know, are not employed. And I'm the only one that, out of the board, that works for somebody else and not for myself. So it's very difficult for me to be able to make those changes and have to go back to my boss and say, I need to change the date, but now I need the entire day off, not just 2 hours. So that's the reason this was placed on the agenda, so that we can have this discussion again and hopefully consider the fact that it's not easy for me to take that time off.
Mrs. Van Hook, President Anderson, Mrs. Van Hook, what does work for you?
The 31st at 1:30 was the time that I took off. And it's easier for me to take 2 hours off, 2 or 3 hours off versus an entire day. It's very hard to do that because I don't get paid, and it's tough.
Sure. So the 31st didn't work for me any longer because I have I have a convention and I'll be out of town. I did say that I am happy to call in, that I would be on a plane at 4:30. I'm happy to do that, whatever works. But Mrs. Johnson and I was worried about the technology and that being able to happen. I'm happy to accommodate that. I don't know how much I can do to be there, but I can't miss this for my job.
So, I don't know if, it is through Zoom, but.
Right, and so then I said, I have free Wi-Fi on the plane at 4:30. I will be in a convention until 2:30 because that got moved. I was supposed to only go until Tuesday, and now it's through Wednesday. But I don't know what that would look like. Like, I'm willing to do it. I just wanted to make this aware that that's what it was. If there is another day that's later in the day, or if something else, or I don't know, whatever might work, then I'm open to whatever works, but those are my restrictions right now, that I will be unavailable till 2:30, which is actually 3:30 our time, and then I will be on a plane at 4:30, which is 5:30 our time.
President Anderson and the rest of the board, things I would like to keep in mind is we all individually have to make accommodations in our schedule, and I am more than willing to do what needs to, be done in order to, I agree to this position, I will meet for the things that I have to meet for. I'm the only one with young kids. So every single time I can't go to certain things because my husband is a physician, he can't change his schedule, right? I have to get sitters, those types of things. So I think it's important for all board members in mind that when we make certain kinds of statements or suggestions, we aren't the only ones that have to make accommodations. And that's hard, that's costly, that does a lot of things. And so again, as I expressed at the last meeting, I don't have a work obligation, but to suggest that I just have free time in order to be able to do anything. So because it was a new day, I'm the one who asked for an earlier time, because then the hope is I can be home to not have to get a sitter, because that's costly. It's costly in multiple ways, not only paying for the sitter, paying for food for the sitter to get, because I'm not the one who's cooking. So I think these things are important to keep in mind. Again, I am more than willing to make adjustments, but we also have However, many other meetings that start at 1:30 and those types of things as well. So that was part of the reason why I asked to see if it could be made earlier in the day. So I recognize the difficulty all around, and I'm not saying we just move on, but I think it's important to note that you aren't the only one impacted, and I think that matters.
President Anderson, I'm sorry, Board Member Wade, and I understand that. My concern was because of her schedule change that now the other 4 were having to accommodate our schedule. And I mean, as far as like events, I do take a lot of time away from work to attend events, to attend school visits. And so, and that's part of my concern, is because I am requesting so much time off work to be able to be there, because it is important to me to attend school visits and to attend performances and whatever it is, and to attend meetings. But this situation is a bit different because I had already requested that time off. And so, you know, that's the difference. And then having to then move it to 8 a.m. And so now I have to take the entire day off versus just 3 hours. So if we can come up with another date with a similar time, I just know that we're very limited on the dates, which is why we were trying to, you know, work all the dates in. But what other date would work for everybody else that?
President Anderson, so I understand everyone's situation. And I guess my concern, we spoke at length to determine and come up, that conversation was pretty detailed and spent some time to try and figure out what we could make with schedules, how we could make it work. And like she said, we're very short in time from our first round interviews to our second round interviews. So we don't really have a lot of leeway there. We did spend a lot of time talking about if they are an out-of-state candidate, that while we were starting at 1:30, we would start with them earlier so it was less impactful because of time zones and things like that. So for me, I can make myself available. Because unlike that, I do have that flexibility, but it does create some issues. Again, it's a lot easier for me to not be available for half a day than to not be available for a full day, and everything. So kind of back with our communication protocols, and this is not on anyone, but I personally didn't really like how it was handled, because we were asked, could we move it to the 1st? And then we were asked, you know, starting at the same time. And then it was, well, how early can you start? So we spent a lot of time coming up with the date and time that tried to work. I get some things change. And everyone handles their own schedules differently. But we did spend a lot of time determining what could work for everybody. And then the communication just wasn't really great that was coming out, and it changed. And then I could start earlier. I have that flexibility. And then to see it was an all-day thing, and it was like, oh, that's not what I was expecting. You know, I mean, so I guess we need to work on some communication and be maybe a little more detailed when we're trying to ask about this, but we also need to be aware, like you said, you're not the only one, we're not the only one, I'm not the only one. One person is impacting 4 people's schedule. Whether you had anything scheduled that day or not, it's still impacting 4 people's schedule. So I just wanted to get that out there. With the relevance of what we end up doing, it has none, but I think that's something we need to consider for the future. These are really important. It's really hard doing a superintendent search and the interviews. This takes up a whole lot more time right now than we regularly have to give, and it's hard. So I'm going to leave it at that. For me, can I, and I guess it kind of goes back to my earlier statement, because I can, should I? Can I? Yes. Does it make things difficult? Yes. So I had, in my mind, planned this is what I do, and so, because I schedule things out too. So I'm flexible, I can do whatever, but I think that we need to look at, in the future, when some of these things, not a superintendent search, but things like this, that if they were to come up, we need to try and handle a little differently.
Okay. So at this point, well, and to make the point also is once that date was secured, I built schedules around that date, right? So now that we changed the date, something's gonna hopefully be able to get canceled or moved. But everybody has a valid reason for this. So Ms. Johnson, do we have other options? Is that what we want to do tonight, is actually settle on a date? Or are we, I'm sorry? We have to, okay. So is that something we can do tonight, or do you need to get back to us with the availabilities?
I think President Anderson, I think the availabilities are the Wednesday that was previously selected, that Thursday or Friday. We really don't have many other choices if we're going to continue with the other schedule that is that means that if we did it on Friday, a candidate would have to make reservations that day to fly if they're coming from out of state. Just kind of the scenarios we would be facing, right? So they would make reservations to come to Arizona for the forums that start the following Tuesday at 5 o'clock. So we have to take that into consideration. And I know the timeline was very tight because we wanted to get ahead of the curve, correct? We wanted to select our superintendent before the other 34 select theirs. So we're at a point where it would have to be that sometime that week of either that Wednesday, January 31st, February 1st, or February 2nd. We made a commitment to put out the information about the finalists on February 2nd, and we can still do that, but that would be very tight timeline within hours, and so that people could read about who those finalists are before they come to the forums on the 6th of February.
My suggestion was, what about the 1st at 1:30? This leaves a lot of people unhappy. And then if we're all unhappy, look at that compromise.
The only thing that I could see is I am tied up till 2:30 no matter what, like I'm part of the convention. And so on the 31st, right, the Wednesday, if I move my flight, then I could call in. I would just need to see what that looks like and the amount of time, but it would have to be like 2:30. I wouldn't be available until 2:35.
On the 31st?
Yeah, I would just need to see what the flights look like.
Your availability would be broken up, and you could, I mean, if we're doing interviews, we pretty much figured 1 per hour at 45 minutes with 15-minute intervals. And if you're leaving the convention and then you're checking in at the airport and then,
You know what I'm saying? Like I would figure out if it,
oh, to move your flight later to come home after.
Yes.
Okay. I was like, that's a lot of breaking up.
No,
and
no, no.
then you wouldn't, okay.
Right.
I'm with you now.
President Anderson and members of the board, please keep in mind that the number of first interviews we will be doing has not been determined yet. And if we need additional time, we need to keep that in mind. We have no idea as to how many first interviews will take place. We were estimating an amount, but we weren't locked into that. So
What was the estimation?
Maybe we need to lock in
5.
a number.
Okay.
Well, because it was dependent on the candidates that we received that we felt were viable. I appreciate the difficulty that is there with Board Member Van Hook in order to move a day. I also appreciate the difficulty with which Board Member Schultz is trying to accommodate the schedule. I think there's a lot of potential risk with saying you do it on a day that you're also traveling. And what I mean by risk is there's just a lot of things that could potentially happen that we have no control over, that could impact your ability to be there, that could lead to us waiting to hear from you, waiting for you to call in, which then makes us later for other types of appointments with potential superintendents. And I just don't like necessarily the look of that for individuals who are trying to, shop for us as much as we're shopping for them.
I understand. I just was trying to figure out a compromise in here. I got the same emails, saying 8:30, and so I had no idea that there was even anything just 8:30, and I thought, oh, earlier, that's all, was the time for me.
Board Member Anderson, my problem with the first, initially when I got the email, I said the first, if we had the meeting at 1:30, I have to leave at 3:30 to be at an appointment at 4, which was the problem with the first. So that would only give me 2 hours.
It would be difficult, Mrs. Anderson, I don't think your microphone wasn't on, but the second she was saying would be too much of a time constraint if we started at 1:30. So if it was Friday, it would have to be in the morning, or we could start at 1:30, you think, on the second? Mrs. Johnson?
President Anderson and board members, we could do the second. Just remember the decision will have to be made. It's going to be made anyway to who we move to finalist. Again, there would be no flexibility if we had more than 5 candidates, unless you want to go into late evening, if we start at 1:30. The first gave us a little more opportunity to have flexibility if there is more than 5. If there's less than 5, fine, but if there's more than 5, we want to be prepared to have some extra time there to be able to not go into a 8 or 9 o'clock at night interview. That would be my recommendation, is either the 31st or the 1st, with the second being, or if we were to start on the 2nd, that we start in the morning.
Yeah, we couldn't start at 1:30 on the 2nd, because if we are dealing with people on the East Coast, even if we only did the 5 and we finished at 7 o'clock our time with the intervals and then had our conversation, if we're not making a decision, let's just say it was pretty easy decision, I'm just saying that we could be contacting people at 9 p.m. East Coast time, and that's just not.
About an hour and a half
Friday.
each.
Yeah, that's
that
just
could
not
go
appropriate.
to about 10 p.m. Or do we have, or can we, if there is somebody on the East Coast, schedule them first?
Yes, and that was Ray and Associates' intent, was to schedule anyone with a time difference at the beginning when we had the 1:30 start time. So that was already in play. But again, not knowing who the candidates are, not knowing how many we will have, there's a lot of variables here. And so it would be, it has to remain somewhat flexible, the scheduling of the candidates.
Yeah, because I mean, even if we have to, let's say we had to do the 1st, February 1st, does that still give us enough time?
You mean at 1:30 on the 1st? Is that what you're talking about?
No.
I'm just trying to understand your question.
Let's say we did move it to February 1st at 8:30. Would that give us enough time, considering I'd have to leave by 3:30 latest to?
like Ms.
on that
Johnson
day.
said, it would just depend on how many people we have. I mean, if we kept it to 5, that would put us at about 2 o'clock, I think. I mean,
If we had 5, yes, we could do up to 7 between 8:30 and 2:30.
And I don't
and,
know,
but that's
3:30,
back to
excuse
back
me.
to back to
Yeah,
back. And
that's
that, I
with
mean,
15-minute
intervals in between, and then that would restrict us to an hour of conversation for determination if we had 7.
Barely an hour. You'd probably only have about 30 minutes to have a conversation.
and I don't
At the
know if
end.
earlier is possible on the 1st. Like, I don't know what your schedule, what time you start work, or like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know what, or if that works for Mrs. Wade. If earlier than 8:30 is a possibility too, and then that would give you.
That makes my life easier in that my husband works evenings because he's urgent care. So that's why all of the evening events are ridiculously hard for me.
So if it was 7, is that better? Gives more time, or Mrs. Reese?
Either way, I'd still have to take the time off. Yeah.
I mean, I can make it work.
99% of the time, I can also make it work, but it's that 1% that messes me up.
Thoughts, Ms. Anderson? Board Member Anderson? You're awfully quiet. Share your thoughts.
Remind me, so the 29th and 30th were not options, correct? Because of other board member, you were out of town those 2 days, okay. And then we have committed to the 2nd of February to make our decision for the finalists, correct? And pushing that out a week, the 5th or 6th, can you please remind me of the consequences of that?
Okay, so as per the schedule that was set, the first interviews were to take place on the 31st. The announcement of the finalists was to take place on February 2nd, which is a Friday, and the bios would be available on our website. On February the 6th, we would have the forums for the finalists. That will start at 5 o'clock in this room. On February 7th, the candidates will attend a tour of 3 of our schools and also meet and greet with the cabinet members. In the afternoon at 1:30 on February 7th, the candidates will then meet with the board members for their second and final interview.
Thank you. It was the forum I didn't have on my calendar. That's the big date. Okay, thank you.
President Anderson, Ms. Johnson, so the second round of interviews would eliminate some from the first round, or that's up to us?
So the second round of interviews is actually your finalists.
Okay.
And you'll have information based on a survey that will be available when the forums take place. And so you'll have the forum information, the feedback from the forums, from the public. You'll also be able to meet with them for the second interview, ask some more detailed questions, and then after that, Ray and Associates will guide you through a process to come to a final decision.
President Anderson, Ms. Johnson, so if we were to meet on the 2nd, at what point do we then meet just as a board to be able to discuss which candidates we like before you have to have it posted on the 6th?
You would be meeting that day.
We have to post
After
it
you're done.
on the 2nd, so.
Yes.
Once we finish our first round interviews, that's where we have to have conversation and figure
After.
out who's going to, who we're doing second interviews on, who will be attending the forum on the 6th.
That is correct. On the same day that you do the first interviews, the board will move forward their finalists. Now remember, you'll have information about all the candidates. You'll be able to see everything this Saturday. You're going to be able to start your research, and then when we meet in executive session on the 24th, you're going to come together as a group and decide your first round candidates.
And let's keep in mind, I'm just saying.
It's Groundhog's Day.
Yeah. Well, and the 31st, that's only 2 weeks from now. Yeah. And so, obviously, if we did it prior to the 2nd, I think the 2nd's too close. However, if we were so inundated, if you will, on the 1st, like we've talked about it, but we could come back and make our decision. I mean, so I'm just saying that when you don't run as close to the deadline, it gives you a little more. But that's just.
So your recommendation is?
I will be here when I am told to be here.
Literally, like the 31st is like my empty day. If I look at my calendar, that's like my empty, oops, wrong. Yeah, my empty day. And then not again till the 23rd. If we decide on the 2nd, I just have to get approval from my boss. So, First, I got to leave by 3:30 latest. So I'm just concerned about that. If we're not done, then that I can't change. But the 2nd, if we start early, I have no choice but to take time off. So I'm going to have to just get that confirmed with my manager. So, I mean, right now I could say the 2nd and just hope and pray that
I was going to say, my recommendation in that situation, and I know you're saying the 2nd, my recommendation would be to try and do the 1st then, with the commitment that we'll be either done by the time you need to leave. When we know how many candidates we're interviewing, we'll have a better pulse on that. And correct me, if for some reason on the 1st we have the need to interview more candidates than we can allow time for, we could look to roll to the 2nd in the morning if we have to. And I know that's not, it's more time that you don't want to take. I understand that. I'm just saying if that's what we ran into, I would really rather give ourselves that time on the 1st and perhaps start a little earlier if we can, again, looking at the candidates. That if we do have some East Coast people, maybe we can start at 7 o'clock or something in the morning to give more time. We can, again, it's hard after we know. I'm sorry, I'm just personally not comfortable running up against the 2nd, that we're leaving everything in a day. I'm hoping we're getting everything done in a day. That's the plan. I'm just not the type of person who, given this situation and so much unknown and things like that, and I wouldn't want to be a candidate notified Friday night, because the intent would be, we said we would notify them ahead of time, or like by the 2nd, but I think the intent is in the morning. When we talked about the 31st, if we made our decision, they would be notified on the 1st. Yeah, you know, so I am not comfortable running up against the 2nd. While could I make it work in my schedule? I could make it work in my schedule. That's just not something I'm comfortable because we're running too close to a deadline.
So, so if we were to do it on the 1st, recommendation is to start like at 7 a.m.
Yeah, if everyone could do that, if we're worried about the time frame, that if everyone could start at 7 a.m., because if we're starting, Again, if we have East Coast people, because then that's 9 o'clock their time. We could start at 7 a.m. if we don't have East Coast people. I would not do West Coast people at 7 a.m. because it's 6 a.m. their time. But
Or local.
if we do have West Coast or East Coast people, then we can start at 7. And if we happen to not, then we can start at 8.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Just said a lot of days. Thanks. We're talking about the first, yes, at 7. Okay, I just want to make sure I put it in my calendar appropriately, that's all.
And are we still discussing rolling the decision to finishing that day or keeping Friday open?
Oh,
We'll try to finish. The intent would be
The
to
intent
finish
would
that
be to
day,
finish that day,
but yes.
yes.
I think a lot of this will become a lot easier after our executive session next week when we know exactly how many candidates we have, and then it makes it a little bit easier for us to make sure that we're keeping your schedule so you can go to your appointment, those types of things. So at the very least, we still have
and I'm
some
hoping
time for that.
I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm hoping it's not more than 5, that if it's more than 5, that Ray and Associates weeds that out. So we're not interviewing like 10 people.
Well, because we're getting all of the candidates this weekend, is it, and then we're choosing the 5 from the candidates that are provided to us, right?
So we'll
Or
go.
whatever number we
we'll
arbitrarily
go through the
create.
whole process in the executive session next week.
Yeah.
And you'll have all the candidates that are available, right? And have been vetted through Ray and Associates. It is it's your job to basically select the people that you would like to do first interviews with, that you would believe would be the best candidates for this district.
Okay.
And it will become a lot more apparent once you see them, and then once we meet and you all discuss that together in executive session.
Okay. Although this was painfully long and tough, I appreciate everybody really caring about this, really focusing on having the time to make the right decision. This is a huge decision. This scares the heck out of me as far as the turnover that we've had in the short amount of time for as long as I've been here, but we really, what? Are you kidding me? Thank you, everybody. All right, there's,
So do we need
this is an action item, so are we voting on anything? We're voting on the date again? Are we going to do anything?
We got to vote on the date, the agreed upon date.
Because it's an action item, do we not?
I'd like to make a motion that we move the date from January 31st to February 1st for the virtual search.
7 a.m.
7 a.m. Superintendent search first round interviews.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Oh, we did it, team.
Well done, well done. All right, 8.1, future agenda items.
President.
Yes, absolutely.
President Anderson, I know we discussed this in the information item, but I would just like to formally ask for a future agenda item to discuss the Upstander program and the district's role in the community regarding teen violence.
Thank you. And we're also putting on for discussion about time, board meeting time change and looking into work studies. And future dates. Thank you. Okay, any other recommendations or anything we need to go over? Okay, I move that we adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Thank you for those that stuck it through.